Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 2021-2022 Convocation for this school year. Thank you for being here. There's a lot of energy in the room. I love these t-shirts too. And so I'm glad that you can all be here, and I think that you know that we always have just a couple of cool things that we're going to try to do to energize us, to ground us in our vision and mission and our commitments. And so the first cool thing that we're going to do is introduce a special guest, and someone that is really going to help us understand this place and who we are. So I'd like to introduce this gentleman, Mr. Elliot Funmaker, Sr., who's the manager and singer of the Wisconsin Dells Singer and Dance Troupe. His father, Kenneth Funmaker, formed the Wisconsin Dells Singers in 1976. He's an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation with ties to the Meskwaki settlement in Tama, Iowa. Elliot believes that there are many misconceptions about Native Americans and that education and cultural presentations will change that. For example, Native American attire is called costumes when the correct terminology is called regalia. His troupe has performed at many venues, such as the Overture Center, Kids in the Rotunda, the Mount Horeb Festival, Wild West Days, and numerous schools and conferences, although his main passion is singing at Native American powwows. Please help me welcome Mr. Elliot Funmaker to the stage.
Aho, isa Krishna I kareki we know, ege mogi sagaka he guide no. Hello, my name's He Who Comes to the Center of the Earth, and no, I'm not the devil. My name is Elliot Funmaker Sr. It's a pleasure being here today in Sun Prairie. We have a lot to go over in a short while, and so we're going to get through this real fast. That song I sang is a love song. It was created by my forefathers back in the day. It's a love song about an old man who's trying to communicate with a younger woman. And so these things go on and on and on, such as the teaching as we're here today to discuss. The Creator, God, Maona, placed the Ho-Chunk people at a sacred site north of here called Mogashush. Mogashush in Ho-Chunk translates to Red Banks. Red Banks is now Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of the Packers. And so, as the Creator breathed life into us, He bestowed many different duties upon us. One of them was to take care of this land. And part of this land was always to help us live. Since that time to where we're at right now, a lot of things had changed. One of them is all you good people are here. There are many races now here in this beautiful village, Sun Prairie and Madison. And so we are the caretakers of this land, the host tribe, the Ho-Chunk Nation. Ho-Chunk means sacred voice, sacred tongue, first tongue. We are mother of a lot of tribes that have went south, west, east. Our land, our territory started from Green Bay over to the Mississippi by St. Paul, down the Mississippi to Prairie du Chien, across to Starved Rock, Illinois, to Chicago, and then back up. That is prime Ho-Chunk territory. So, welcome to Ho-Chunk Nation territory. Has also been said that part of our territory also went as far as St. Louis, over to the Ohio Valley, and then back this way. So we know about the different territories. And so, as the caretakers of this land, we have to take care of this land. And so now that you are here, it is your responsibility also. We are sharing this responsibility. And we have some people that are very passionate in this. Part of taking care of this land is taking care of our children, our people. That's why you are here today. The Creator blessed us with life. Let us live another day. And so today, we come here gathered to learn, put our minds together, think as one instead of many, to come up with these ideas, how to get our youth interested in these things that need to go on, the good things. There's been a lot of bad things that has been going on. We are here to learn and to teach. Each one of you have a mission to teach the younger people how to be good adults. And I'm very proud to be here today to speak to each and every one of you here today. Take pride in yourself. When you look in the mirror, look at yourself and smile and say, I'm going to make a difference today. And you have. You're here today. I'm here. That is a good start. I grew up in the Wisconsin Dells area. And when I was growing up, education was a lot different than it was today. Over there, it was all about the tourist business. And we had to learn this and we had to learn that. I grew up in the show business. And so everything was on the move. Hurry up. I'm glad that I hurried up so much, it's 59 years later. And so I never thought that I would be up here speaking But somebody has to take the lead. I was one of those kids that really raised a lot of cane in the schoolroom. And I survived. We're survivors. That's what we do. We're good at that. One of the things that we always teach our young ones is that we have a very, very short time on this earth. We have to make the best of every day. You are going to show these kids how to do that. You're going to show through leadership, through different skills. And if you need help, that's what we're here for today. We're going to ask each other, how do we do this? How do we get this done? And so it's no different than being in a village. Speaking of villages, the word Dejop means the 4 sacred lakes. When the Ho-Chunk Nation had its government, we have our traditional Ho-Chunk chief. The main place of government was at the site of the state capital. They did not pick this out of just any old place. It is a sacred site of the Ho-Chunk Nation. They knew what they were doing when they picked this site. My father made a very beautiful song, Dejop Chi. That means the village of Madison. Dejop Chi da washi de. That means stand up. The people of Madison, stand up. Dejop Chi da washi de. Dejop Chi da washi de. Dejop Chi da washi de. Yo hey yo. Hicha kora. That means my friends. Hicha koro dejop chi da washi de, heidushka la washi de. A hard way of life is the heidushka way. Dejop chi da washi de, yo hey yo. Dejop chi da washi de. Dejop chi da washi de, Dejop chi da washi de, Dejop chi da washi de, yo hey yo. Hicha koro Dejop chi da washi de, heidushka da washi de, Dejop chi da washi de, yo hey. Dejop is also a word for the name of our casino. So when you get done here, I want each and every one of you take your wallets and your purses and head on over to the casino and spend $1,000 over there. You'll make me very happy. Again, my time is very limited here, and the people that have asked me to come over here, I only had 2 days to decide to come over here. But you know, I felt it was very important that I come over here to talk to each and every one of you. And I understand the mission that is bestowed upon you. I respect that. As I was growing up, as I stated, I'm a professional performer. Been dancing ever since I had a soggy diaper on and all that good stuff. But I also joined the Marine Corps. I graduated. I got my GED before my class graduated. I went into the Marine Corps when I was 17 and a half. I learned a lot while I was in the Marine Corps to adapt, overcome. And so these things here that I talk about, they're very inspirational skills that each and every one of you have. You went to school for this. This is what you wanted to do. Now it's time to make your bread and butter. And there's going to be one kid out there. Maybe he might just look just like me. Maybe he is my son or my grandson. He's going to need help. He or she is going to need help. Make sure that don't leave no kid behind. It's very important. At this time, I want to say a prayer. Aho, Ma'ona, God, please help our teachers and our staff to teach the youth, the students, our future, how to become good human beings on this hard road of life. There are a lot of obstacles in our way. Help these teachers guide everybody through their maze of life. And all the people that are in higher positions, Creator, God, help these people so we can help each other and our mind become one so we can learn. Aho, Pinagigi, thank you. You folks have a good day. You've been a good audience. I don't have any more apples, though. You're on your own. Have a good day.
Wow. So please join me in one more round of applause for Elliott Funmaker for his blessing, his land recognition, his message, and his service to this country. And so from here, I'd like to introduce our school board president, Dr. Steve Schrader.
Good afternoon.
Great afternoon.
Well, thank you. You're already much more fun than the secondary group. Well, of course she's an otter. If it wasn't you, it'd be Cynthia yelling. So my friend Mike gave me that. He told me to wear it. I told him that I didn't want to show any favoritism, so we'll just keep it here. And where's Jillian Block, by the way? Yeah, Jillian. Well, I wouldn't be getting too excited. You owe me a shirt from 3 years ago. Remember the Welcome Home shirt? Steve, I'll get it for you. It must be in the mail, but anyhow, it's coming. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I won't hold my breath for that. So, Dr. Sarin, thank you. Does anybody else feel like summer was about 8 days? Like, unbelievable. And the older we get, the faster the time goes. But Brad, I want to thank you and Stephanie Leonard-Whitty and Janet Rossiter for your leadership, especially during the past 18 months, which has not been easy. I also want to introduce you to your school board. We've got Karen Dietrich, Tom Weber, Bryn Horton, Alan Foster's here someplace. I saw him. And a few members couldn't be with us, Dave Huckstra, Carol Albright, and then our two student members, Sarah Rhodes and Carson Schmolt. I think they're probably still sleeping. So that I know that must be the Token Springs folks. And Jill, I just want you to know you've raised an amazing son. So it's awesome to work with Carson as well as Sarah. They provide such an important voice at the board table for students. What I want to do now is welcome new staff members to Sun Prairie. If you're new to this district, would you please stand? Welcome to Sun Prairie. We're really glad to have you here. I also want to recognize everyone who is involved in summer school. So if you were involved in summer school, would you please stand? Thank you. Really appreciate all the work that you put into certainly an unconventional year in summer school. You can really tell the West Side folks, so there's no mistaking with those shirts. Very nice. Chris Sadler wanted me to mention that you probably saw it coming in. There's a table with some information about our wellness programs, including, for those of you who are new staff, you may not know, we just opened up a year ago an employee wellness clinic, which is right now in the Dean Clinic, but in a year it'll be part of what is now Cardinal Heights, what will then be Central Heights. So please make sure that you check out all the resources at that table in regard to the wellness programs that we offer in this district. So anybody travel this summer? Was it nice to sort of get away? So my family and I took two vacations. We were also fortunate, I was fortunate enough to attend a couple of conferences, though now a couple of conferences that are coming up are already canceled and are moving to, or they're canceled in person, moving to virtual. But we took two vacations. One I would constitute as sort of a beach vacation, and one was a mountain vacation. And I'm not the world's greatest person to go on vacation with. That wasn't funny. So I'm sort of a type A person. I like to stay busy, so sitting on a beach is not really for me. But a friend of mine had been telling me about this TV show that I have to watch. So I watched it. I watched all 5 seasons. And maybe you've heard of it. Anybody know who Jack and Rebecca Pearson are? Right? And Toby and Kate and Randall and Beth and Kevin and too many to fill in there. But This Is Us. So I watched This Is Us, and I'm sitting on a beach watching this on my device. And of course, you can't get through an episode without crying, right? Especially when Randall cries. You know, those big crocodile tears, you just start crying. So I'm sitting on a beach, and my kids are coming up to me, Dad, are you okay? Are you crying? Sunscreen again. So it's really a great show, and let's talk about crock pots for a second. I used to have a very close relationship with our crock pot, but I don't think I can ever use that again. And I'm not going to give it away, but what happened in that show, right? I'll never look at crock pots the same. Can you advance the slide, please? So there's one episode, I think it was season 4, episode 1, but who's counting, where Kevin is talking with Tess, his niece, and she is talking to him about coming out. And he says to her, we go through this life slowly but surely, just collecting these little pieces of ourselves that we can't really live without until eventually we have enough of them where we feel whole. And to me, isn't that what we do in education? Don't we help students collect those little pieces of themselves? So when they leave you and go on to the next grade or go on to college or go on to their career, they start to feel more whole. And I think what students don't often know is those of us who teach, we actually learn probably more from our students than they will ever learn from us. So the other thing that I did on vacation, one of the other things I did was read. I read a fair amount. Any Brene Brown fans? Okay, there was only one person in the secondary group who gave a shout out. So any Brene Brown fans? It's okay. This isn't church. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and I reread a couple of her books. And there's one part in particular in The Gifts of Imperfection where she talks about the way to cultivate worthiness in one's life is really through 3 ways: courage, compassion, and connection. And I love that. Courage, compassion, connection. And with courage, Brene Brown says that we do that by being vulnerable. And her definition of vulnerability is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And isn't that what you do every day? You show up, you take a risk, you're uncertain of what the outcome may be, and you're exposed emotionally. But so are our students, of course. That student in your class who raises their hand, unsure of the answer, isn't that a test of vulnerability and really a great thing? So the courage part really resonates with me. It takes a lot of courage to be in education these days. These are not easy times for you nor for our students. It's certainly not an easy time to be in a leadership position in a school district. Every time I wake up, there's an email, somebody threatening to sue us over masks, and I mean, you name it. We need to get back to a place of civility, first of all, in this country and in our community. But it takes a lot of courage to do what you do and to also lead this great school district. So the second point that Brene Brown talks about is compassion. She talks about compassion toward others, of course, but also compassion toward ourselves. And again, I think now more than ever, we need more compassion and we need more kindness. So thank you for what you do in your schools and the District Service Center, and for those of you who work between schools. And we've got some 4K folks here, I know, so thank you for those of you who teach our littlest learners, for having that compassion and displaying and practicing that compassion on a daily basis. So the last point that Brene talks about is connection. And I just came across this study a couple of weeks ago, but there's a study that's still ongoing at Harvard. It's been going on for 80 years. And it was men at the time, where they interviewed these men. Every year they gave the men a mental and a physical evaluation, and they have hundreds of thousands of pieces of data. And what they've discovered is it's connection, deep connection, that helps people not only be happier, which you would imagine, but also makes them live longer. And I thought, how powerful is that? Those connections. I've been fortunate enough in my 10 years on the board in Sun Prairie to have developed a few what I call spiritual partnerships. Actually, I stole the term from Gary Zukav, but he refers to them as spiritual partnerships. And we need that now more than ever with each other. Because this next year, what we thought this school year was going to look like 3 months ago, it's obviously turning out quite different. And you may have seen on the news, it was just issued this morning, that Dane County will be instituting a mask mandate for indoors starting this Thursday again. So as soon as we sort of thought that we had turned the corner, we're back to where we were. We need each other now more than ever. So during this past year, I visited a few classrooms, mostly virtual, obviously. And the courage and the compassion and the connection that I saw was unbelievable. So I just want to mention a few of the classrooms I was in. Mrs. Sullivan at Westside, just really, really amazing. Mrs. Schmidt at Meadowview. She makes me bring her Starbucks, and I do, but Amy, just, yes. Cynthia, one more outburst and you're going to come up here. Okay. Remember 2 years ago you came up here and you haven't forgiven me since? Okay. But Amy, just watching you navigate, as all of you did, the kids who were in your classroom and trying to engage with the kids who were virtual was incredible. My friend, Mrs. Coop at Bird, just watching her in her classroom, which, by the way, I mentioned at the morning session, was talking about seeing the school district through the eyes of my kids, which most of us tend to see the world now through the eyes of our children. And I mentioned for my oldest daughter, who will be is a senior this year, Amy Ledford has been unbelievably transformational. So Amy, you weren't here this morning, which I thought you were, but wherever you are, I just want to thank you for helping give Caskey the confidence that she still has today. I was fortunate enough to visit Mrs. Boo's class at Royal Oaks. Just unbelievable. Katie, happy belated birthday, by the way. Keena has her cheesecake, and we'll drop it off either tonight or tomorrow. But just thank you for that. And I'm just mentioning a few people because, well, I obviously can't mention all of you, but you are doing the same as what they all did. And just know that I see it, I recognize it, and the vast majority of this community also sees it. So Dr. Sharon and I also spent some time at some of our 4K sites, and unbelievable work that's going on at our 4K sites. Just really appreciate all the work that you all do with our littlest learners, and just watching not just the playing that was happening, but the actual learning. So that was great to see. So I mentioned Amy Ledford. One other person I need to mention, and she works also at Bird School, which coincidentally is where my 2 children went. But somebody who was very transformational in my youngest daughter's life, my youngest will be in 7th grade, is Leah Martin at Bird. And so Leah, I just wanted to thank you for everything that you did for Keena during those 2 years, and you were really a transformational educator in her life, so thank you for that. So we know that relationships are really at the heart of teaching and learning, and again, I just want to thank all of you for your courage, your compassion, and the connections that you've made and will make this year. The reality is we need you now more than ever. So I'm often asked, what are your priorities for this coming year? And so I'm going to just speak my personal priorities. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. And I have 2, and they, not surprisingly, are about equity. The first is I've been working with a small group of folks, Janet Rossiter, our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Kathy Walker, Director of Nutrition Services, and Jamie Racine, our Community Schools Coordinator. We've been working on, and we have a vision, and we've got a plan to put a food bank and a clothing closet in each of our schools. We already have it in some of our schools. We need it in all of our schools because we have kids in all of our schools who are hungry. And growing up, as a child who sometimes the lunch I had at school on Friday, I didn't eat until the following Monday at lunch. I'm so old we didn't have school breakfast at the time. So hunger is something that I'm passionate about. It's personal for me, and we have the ability to eradicate hunger for our kids in the school district, and we're going to do that. So the second priority that I have, and for those of you who are returning, you already know this. For those of you who are new, you may not know this, but in May of this year, the Board of Education unanimously passed a resolution saying that this school district will move away from the over-reliance on standardized testing to assess student learning. Now, we're obviously going to do what the federal government and state governments require us to do. But we know that we can't talk about equity on one hand and then be so behind these standardized tests, which disproportionately impact students of color, students with disabilities, students who English is their first language, and kids who are at or below the poverty level. We know this, but yet we continue doing these standardized tests. We need to move away from standardized tests, and we need to allow you to actually teach and not teach to a test. So that's going to take a lot of work to figure out how do we assess some of these skills, which, by the way, you all know this. The skills that are the most important are not the skills that we're testing on these standardized tests on. Right? Empathy, creativity, teamwork, communication. There are organizations like the World Economic Forum who say these are the most important skills. We need to assess those skills. It's not saying that cognitive skills don't matter. Of course they matter. But we need to get to a place where we are allowing kids to play again, where kids can be creative. So again, that's going to take a lot of our time, but I'm excited about where that is going. And again, the school board has been very clear that that is the direction this school district will go. So I talked to you a little bit about my vacation, and after I got done with This Is Us, I just sort of sat there because I didn't really have anything else to do. I did a little bit of reading. The other thing that I do is I like to write. I like to journal. I like to dabble in poetry. I'm not very good at all. Right? I don't pretend to be Dickinson or Whitman or Yeats or Frost or Angelo or Amanda Gorman. But poetry is something that I'm interested in. And I think some of our greatest poets today are songwriters. And so songwriters like Springsteen, Dylan, I put in Dylan just for you, Mary Leffler. I don't really care for him, but she does, so she told me to say it. No, she didn't. Jim Croce, Gordon Lightfoot, Stephen Stills, Graham Nash, Neil Young. I think those are Chris Christopherson, amazing songwriters. My favorite of all time is Johnny Cash. And to me, Johnny Cash was the definition of a troubadour. And he was fighting for equity long before it was popular. So if you could advance the slide, please. So one of his quotes is, all of your life, you'll be faced with a choice. You can choose love or hate. I choose love. And I thank all of you for choosing love, because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We're in the business of providing love to children. And I think it's that love, the courage, the compassion, and that connectivity where we can help every student in this school district collect those little pieces of themselves so they too can begin to feel whole. So I want to thank you for everything that you do. You don't get thanked enough. I know that these past 18 months in particular have been very difficult on you. They've been very difficult for our children, but just know that we stand behind you, we support you, and never forget that you're dream makers. You literally make dreams come true. So I hope that you have an amazing school year, and if I can do anything for you, please never hesitate to reach out. Thank you. I was sort of thinking maybe I could auction this mic. What do you think? No? Okay.
Please join me in giving Steve one more round of applause for that message. Okay, normally we've got the Business Education Partnership and the foundation that comes up and gives us a message. This year, just because of the compressed nature of not only having Elliott Fundmaker here, but also Cornelius Minor coming in. So, and I don't know if you've done this yet. If you have Instagram, follow him on Instagram. He's just got this amazing message that continues from even this presentation on out. Anyhow, I wanted to acknowledge both the Business Education Partnership and the Sun Prairie Education Foundation for helping us stay grounded in our vision and mission and serving kids and families. I'd also like to acknowledge the Bank of Sun Prairie, who've been just amazing partners, from everything from like welcoming our staff with all of those bags coming into this convocation today, to also helping us fund that calendar that's sent all over 79 square miles across the district. We've got one hanging in our kitchen. I hope you do too. And so, and a number of other things that we do. They also support the foundation too. So just help me give a round of applause to all three of those organizations that have been great. So, like Dr. Schrader said, like, this is my summer. Absolute blur. Like, I don't even know if I can remember individual things. Like, at one point, early before the Delta variant had happened, we went down to Disney and sweat and fought for 4 days straight down there. I don't know if you've ever been to Disney with 4 kids and everybody's like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. Let's go on this ride. No, not that ride. And you're just like, trying to figure it all out. And so, there were a couple of just like small instances where we were able to like re-engage with the kids and try to center as we like launch our oldest off to college too, which is just unbelievable that he's an alumni now of the Sun Prairie Area School District. So like you, summer was a blur. And so we're coming out of this 2020 period of time that was very hard into 2021, looking forward to 2022 and 23. And that's just sort of an interesting place and time that we're all at right now. And so, one of the things that I think is important is just to try to, as we start this 21-22 school year, also reflect on literally what we just came out of. And I have this is a very good friend that sort of describes what we came out of is 4 items, 4 crises that happened literally at the same time. And those things, like tectonic plates, if you ever took geography, they shook all of us. They were the ground underneath our feet that was shaking. And so it literally reshaped the environment that every single one of us stand on. And it made, at least for me, and I know that you join me, many of us like off of our equilibrium. I just felt like I was on like disequilibrium. I was dizzy, or I just couldn't get my footing right during this time. So the first of those four like competing crises was the pandemic. When 2 Marches ago, it hit us like a freight train. And so we just all were like reeling with this pandemic. And to make matters worse, it just wasn't the pandemic alone. It was all of the garbage that went along with the pandemic. People debating about whether we should or should not mask. People debating about whether we should or should not have vaccinations. People debating about whether like the experts had credibility. People debating about like not debating, just the fluidity of all of the variants that like made every single decision that we were trying to like hold on to difficult, because all of the variables were changing at the same time. So this was one of like those first items that shifted the ground underneath our feet. And that wasn't the only one. It was just the first of four. The second one was a political crisis. This is just one of those images that just like shakes me to my core. And of course, just like the pandemic, it just wasn't this instance. It was all of the things that went along with it. It was like on one side of the spectrum trying to like suppress mail-in voting, and then the other side of the spectrum trying to like suppress electronic voting. And then you had like this concept of this big lie where we were like undermining the concept of a democracy at the same time that there was like an acknowledgement of how powerful our voice is when we vote by trying to suppress it, which is just unbelievable. That was the second crisis. The third crisis was an economic crisis. And it wasn't just an economic crisis that was like singular in nature, but of course it had all of the things that went along with it. We had eviction moratoriums. We had like, and this is in particular to Dane County, because many of us like enjoy going to restaurants. We just saw restaurants, our favorite places, just struggling to try to like make it through that pandemic. Like I was picking up like, fish and French fries on the weekends just to make sure that like we were able to support those restaurants to get through this pandemic. And it wasn't just that. It was just like this dizzying display of having like layoff notices on one side of the spectrum, and like us, we had to serve during a pandemic. Had to. Didn't have a choice. And there were a lot of like essential workers that joined us and having to follow through on what we were called to do from the very beginning. And so it was a difficult time, and that was the economic crisis. And the last thing that shook the ground underneath our feet was a racial awakening. And this racial awakening changed how we see everything forever. And so when you take all of these things together, I'm not going to put this up there for very long because I look at it and I start to get a headache immediately. Where's the Tylenol? So like it really created like this dizzying effect. Like you're literally off of equilibrium as you're trying to like figure out like what's just happened. And then when you put on top of that the local things that we had to do here, we had to figure out like how to reopen. All of the timelines, all of every single decision that went along with reopening. At the same time, we had to like scale up and use technology in a way that we had never used before. We had never used technology in that way. And we had like 2 weeks to figure it out. At the same time that we had to like figure out like we have to establish boundaries for our secondary schools, and that has to be done more than a year and a half ahead of time. We have to get it done on behalf of our families and our kids. And at the same time, we're doing something that historically in the state of Wisconsin has not happened for more than 25 years. And that's build a second full comprehensive high school, in addition to our existing comprehensive high school and our high school academy at PPA. And so like, when you look at these local items, on top of the four things that shifted the ground underneath us, I really felt like we were like just like settling in on the edge of chaos, and any decision that we were making because of all of the affordances and the constraints that went into that decision making, every single one of them was imperfect. And so if there's any like humbling thing, is the realization that I am imperfect as a leader. The decisions that I was trying to make on behalf of our kids and families and our staff and staying grounded in our vision and mission were imperfect, and everything had affordances and constraints. It was an extremely difficult year. And so, and like, That's just not me, that's the district. And it left many of us, like, stressed and exhausted. And so, like, I just want to, like, acknowledge where we were all at coming out of that 2020 school year into this. And, like, I don't want to sort of jump over it or glaze it over. Difficult time. And I think it, like, stands to reason that we begin to say, like, all right, so we're in 2021-2022 school year, and who are we now as a team, as a district, as a staff, as a result of coming out of what we just experienced? And where do we go from here? What are our next things that we're supposed to accomplish? And what have we learned? And so, like, I'm going to advance this, like, new geography. The tectonic plates on this globe have now shifted, and I think it's more networked. And so, like I said, you know, we did a Clark W. Griswold drive, 19 hours down to Disney, and I had a lot of dashboard time as the kids were fighting in the back. And I'm going to advance, I think, what we should consider as we think about what we have learned coming out of that. And it's this. I think we're moving into a world where every single one of us has to understand that we're a part of the solution. That we must do something related to all of those concepts that shook the ground underneath us. We're moving into a world where every single one of us is a part of the solution. Let's take the pandemic. So, we can't solve the pandemic unless we choose to vote, unless we choose to get vaccinated, unless the people that we trust, like these amazing people, please give them a round of applause, as they helped us get vaccinated here in Sun Prairie, unless we listen to experts, unless we wash our hands. We're not getting out of the pandemic unless we do that, every single one of us. Take the political crisis. We're not getting out of this political crisis until we do things like vote. Every single one of us have to vote. We have to check our sources for information to make sure they're credible. We've got to engage each other. We've got to volunteer. So these are pictures of what happened in this building. So the city of Sun Prairie is just struggling to try to figure out during a presidential election, how are they going to get to a point where everybody who wants to vote can vote? And we don't have lines that are like all around blocks and everything else that we've seen on social media. And so the school district and the city of Sun Prairie partnered together to try to create the best access for voting that we could during a pandemic. And these are the actual pictures of what happened at Sun Prairie High School. Please give all of our poll workers and all of our volunteers for that election a round of applause. Take the economic crisis. Many people affected just by the implications of having a pandemic and just our response to try to keep ourselves safe. And so we literally could not get out of this unless we had amazing people like these people helping our families and our staff get through it. So no matter where they were, we had them. So this is our school nutrition staff distributing 160,000 boxes worth of breakfasts and lunches last school year. And our racial awakening. And how we accept our responsibility to be educated, to engage one another, to monitor ourselves for our own bias, and to stay first person, local, and immediate, and to engage in anti-racist behavior. And this is a picture of the staff development that we all participated in for curriculum, for curriculum violence. And so something like this is meaningful. We can't respond to what we're called to do in terms of the pandemic of racism unless we all engage and do our part. And so, I think it is. I think we're moving into a networked time where every single one of us have to be a part of that solution. And so, I don't think relative to the pandemic, opting out is an option. I don't think relative to an economic crisis, I don't think relative to our racial awakening, I don't think any of those items, I don't think opting out is an option. And I really think that the only way around it is through it, and that we're standing in a place where we have to bring this new understanding to this school year, to 2021, the 2022 school year. And this is like this odd year, because at the same time that we're acknowledging what 2020 looked like, and all of those things that we covered, we're looking forward to 21, 22, 22, 23. So this school year, we're coming out of feeling some isolation, the quarantines, the stay-at-home orders. We're entering into a space that feels like a little bit normal. This feels right here, a little bit normal. And it's also one of those weird years, because next year, things change forever. And so this year is sort of like this year of acknowledging that we're coming back to normalcy, but there's a lot of things that this year will be the last year of. Our secondary configuration, our system of one comprehensive high school and one high school academy. The identity of this town has the Sun Prairie Cardinals, and that's going to shift. The secondary boundaries, our PPA academy building that used to be the junior high school, and our strategic plan. And so I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about our strategic plan, which I know that you expect, like walking in here, like Brad's going to talk about the strategic plan again. He's going to read the vision and mission, and I have to. And you know that as a superintendent, I have to do that a little bit. But this one's going to be, I think, just a little bit of a looking back upon that strategic plan, okay? So in the 2012-13 school year, we had a board member, Tom Weber. Tom, why don't you raise your hand? And at the time, Tim Culver go around and begin to do SWOT analyses. And they had 60 different interviews with groups trying to figure out, what are we strong at? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our threats? And we had a UW researcher thematically analyze that information, and then present it to a group of community members that met for 3 days to try to figure out, what strategically do we need to do? And that happened in the 2013-14 school year then, where they established the strategic plan. This is the actual data that the UW researcher presented during that meeting for 3 days to our community. It's small, and I'm going to review some of it. So the state of our system in the 2013-14 school year included this. Families were calling out for involvement in our schools. The curriculum had not been updated at the time, if you remember, the Common Core just been passed. The entire state is arguing about it. We hadn't revised any of our scope and sequence yet, and we hadn't updated our instructional materials to match it. We had no equity plan. They really felt like communication was lacking. Remember, in 2013-14, we didn't even have a Facebook page yet, if you can believe it. We literally had no long-range facilities plan in 13-14. We had 7 elementary schools. We were busing students all over the place because we were packed to the gills, if you remember correctly. This was even before we had to move our 5th grades up, if you remember that, to Petrick Marsh and to Prairie View, if you remember that whole ordeal. We had a old safety plan, and that was rapidly, the thoughts about safety plans were rapidly evolving, and we needed to update that safety plan. We had a lack of competitive pay for our teachers. We did not have a one-to-one computer program yet in 13-14, which is sort of unbelievable. Parents were citing a lack of quality for school nutrition. There was a lack of staff development. We had a weak summer school program at the time. There was secondary scheduling concerns. There was a huge concern about lack of diversity in our staff. We had school funding concerns, and we also had a huge concern on capital maintenance at elementary. This was 13-14. This was the state of the school district that our community cited in all of those SWOT analyses. And so I think it's just sort of interesting to call back on 6 years ago, that's where we were at. And so out of that process, and this is the original document, became our strategic plan. This is just an Excel document. This was developed. We've jazzed it up right now, and there's colors, and that's the one I usually show you. But this is the original document I took a snapshot of on that Excel spreadsheet that cites that we want to be a high-performing school district of choice that reflects the cultures of our diverse community, and we want to inspire and prepare every child every day by providing relevant, engaging, and innovative learning experiences, and we want to do so inside and outside the classroom. And in order to try to make baby steps toward that vision and mission, we need to do 4 things really well. We want to embrace teaching and learning. We need to have the absolute best workforce. We need to communicate and engage, and we need to have the facilities and the tight operations to fund it. And if we do those 4 things really well, it'll make it more likely that we together can make progress toward our vision and mission. And so this was the original document. And so what's interesting, now fast forward like a time machine to the 2021-2022 school year, and we are imperfect, and I'm going to own the imperfections as the leader, and also, we've made a little progress, folks. So I stand before you right now in acknowledging that every single one of our schools have family engagement plans, and we've rapidly expanded community schools. Every single grade level and every single department has revised their curriculum through the curriculum renewal and design process, and we have updated every single instructional material across the district to align to the Common Core through committees of our teachers. We have an equity framework, and and this is my 15th year as a superintendent, we are recognized as one of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin that is leading the way in creating identity development with our staff through Beyond Diversity, and also teaming together at sites to try to address issues of inequity through e-teams. We've got a Facebook page. That Facebook page has got 8,254 followers. And I'm here to tell you, it's more than Middleton. Sorry, that's petty. Here's one data point that I'm really proud of, and this has to do with the unbelievable work that you did with parents. We surveyed parents last year in the end of the 2020-21 school year and asked, to what degree are you satisfied with communication? And what our parents told us back in that year of all of those reopening transitions, and in that year of all of those questions and ambiguity and everything like that, our parents told us to a percentage of 84.5 that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the communication from all of you. That is an unbelievable data point, given what we just came out of. Folks, we passed more than $250 million worth of capital referenda to construct and address the rapid growth that the school district had seen and prepare for the future so we don't have to do that again and again and again. $250 million. And the designs of those schools are to a large extent from the engagement of our staff, which is also one of those proudest moments for all of this, for this school district. We're leading the state in safety and security. We invested $5 million into our teacher compensation system through our teacher compensation committee, and we've got a 90% retention rate of our staff, which is amazing. We've got a one-to-one program with Chromebooks and iPads and hotspots. We served 160,000 breakfasts and lunches during the pandemic. We're leading the state in staff development. We've got the largest summer school program in the entire state of Wisconsin in Sun Prairie. We address secondary schedules. We've got a Grow Your Own program. And in 2014, we were at a 9.3% diversity rate, and we are increasing that every year, currently at a 14.8%. We passed $7.8 million worth of referenda to fund our schools. And when I say it's a recurring referenda, that means that we don't have to go back every 3 or 5 years to ask for it again. It's permanent. We have that to operate our schools, to be stable and to make sure that what we are vested in, we can continue to fund. And we've got a capital maintenance plan where we're investing in every single one of the schools. So we're ripping out lockers, we're replacing floors, we're replacing roofs in order to make sure that every single one of our schools is amazing. We are imperfect. And we've made progress through the strategic plan. And it's time to refresh it. Now, if you want to take a look at some of the successes that we've had from the strategic plan, you can. We've got a web page. And I just want to let you know that we're going to engage in another process with our community and with you to try to figure out what defines us for the next 5 years. Because this is what guided our decision making and all of the priorities for the last 5 years, 6 years. Okay, so what can we bring with us from the lessons that we've pulled out of all of those 4 crises and what we've learned from some of the successes here in Sun Prairie as we approach this year which is sort of like this year of lasts in preparation for a year of firsts. And so what can we pull with us? And I think that is when we do things together and we know that we are all a part of that solution, every single one of us do something to be a part of the solution, we can do amazing things together. Now, I showed this picture a couple years ago, and I wanted to bring it up. It's one of my favorite pictures because the sun is literally setting over Sun Prairie, right in front of this building. And it's very picturesque. And so, we are not settling in on the edge of chaos. What we're settling in on is this new frontier where we better understand how we own the future and what every child every day means. And I'm so excited that Cornelius Minor is going to be here because his message just helps us understand what this means in this 2021-22 school year. And if I can express every single emotion I have through emojis, sorry. This school year is one where we need to keep our sanity. And we need to engage in self-care. And we need to do everything that we can to give each other grace, assume positive intentions, and allow room for empathy for others, which is an amazing message, especially with our kids and families and coming out of what they've come out of also. And so, this message, I think, hopefully will help set the stage for the school year. And I know that something else is more exciting, and that is seeing kids excite you. So I'd like to welcome up the Penguin Project.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere.
Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train going anywhere.
One more round of applause as they exit stage. Okay, from here, we're going to take a bio break. We have about 15 minutes. Cornelius Minor will be on sharp at 1:30 here. Okay, so please, there's water, there's granola bars outside, and please be back by 1:30. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
hi staff, it's Michelle. Thank you so much for that. That'll be great. It hadn't really occurred to me until that email went back that would be an issue. But yeah, I thought the morning was fantastic. This is yeah, really good. So it should be a good afternoon too. And anyway, yeah, we'll just wait for him to jump on and go from there. And if you guys want to make any kind of announcements or anything, please feel free. And you know, he'll be jumping on and starting. He'll jump on probably in the next 5 minutes or so. All right. Hi everyone that's joined in. Please feel free to turn your cameras on, use the chat, say hello. It's good to be with you guys this afternoon. Hi, how are you?
Doing well.
Good, good, good. How's your day been going?
It's alright. Yeah.
Busy, yeah, I
We're
bet.
just
Right. Yeah.
kind of getting back into the swing of things
When are the kids back?
next week.
Okay. Okay. I'm based out of New Hampshire, and we have 2 more weeks. They'll send them back right before the Labor Day weekend, you know, for a few days, and then they have the long weekend off. And Cornelius is in Brooklyn. I don't know when the DOE is starting up, but it's August. I can't believe it. But this
I
will be
know,
great.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But how are you doing?
Very good. Hi, Mrs. Martin. Feel free to say hello to colleagues and friends. I don't know if you guys have seen each other, and not sure how many we're expecting, but there's Cornelius. Awesome.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, stay on and say hi. There he is. Hey, Corn.
Hello, how are you all?
Great.
It is so fantastic to see you all.
Hi.
Yes. Wow, oh, and we're in the auditorium, there we are. Yes. Hey, Performing Arts Center, I know you all are getting started, but Performing Arts Center AV team, I don't know if you all can hear me, but AV team, oh, hi Amy. Yep, but AV team, I just wanted to make sure that I am visible alongside my slides so that when you all project AV team that you can see me alongside the slides. I just wanted to make sure that. So if there's anybody on the AV team, just wanted to make sure that that's happening in the background. But so excited to see all of you. Amy, I'm so excited to see you. Miss Martin, again, fantastic to see you. Miss Lee, fantastic. Miss Fisher. We've got Miss Reed, Hagan. Thank you all for being here.
These guys are gearing up. The kids are back next week, right? That's what you guys said next week. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, this is our last week of summer camp in New York City.
Is it?
So,
Yeah.
so we are finishing up summer camp, my partner and I. So we have campers all week, and then campers go away, and then we make the transition back to the school.
Who wants to go to the miners' camp? Sounds good.
So fun! Like, actually, I might recruit some of you all for next year's camp. It's been really, really exciting. Yeah, so this week is the fun week. So it's fall field trip. So today we are harvesting out of our community garden. So the kids have been working since the spring to grow a community garden, and so they are, as we speak, weeding and harvesting the garden. So.
Speaking of gardens, though, how was it? Because there was so much rain I don't know, on the East Coast. I don't know how it was for you all, but we had a lot of rain, Cornelius. Did you guys?
It was good stuff. I mean, we cheated. We started with hydroponics. So we started all the plants hydroponically, and then we just transferred them to soil. So it was a big cheat. I mean, well, no, kids learn hydroponics, so it's not cheating, right? So kids learn hydroponics, yeah. So we started everything indoors with UV lights, and then we moved things outside when the weather got good. And we tend to grow stuff. I mean, you know how it is with kids. You grow stuff that is hard to kill. So like basil, Swiss chard, you cannot kill Swiss chard. So no matter what you do, you're not going to kill the dill. So it's all stuff that kids could be really successful with, and all stuff that's pretty abundant. So dill grows really abundantly, basil grows really abundantly. So every kid could feel so accomplished. They're like, look at all the basil. What they don't know is they're going to be eating pesto for the next 2 years. That's what they don't know. So, yes. Oh, Yes, we did find caterpillars on the dill. Like, okay, so we've got some real gardeners in the house. Like, this is amazing. So Ms. Fisher asked in the chat, did we find any caterpillars on the dill? And what's interesting is, of course, when you're growing indoors, you don't have to worry about like anything. But then when you take things outdoor, all of a sudden, there's this whole ecosystem that comes up around the plants. And so it was really beautiful. A little gross for some of the kids who get grossed out easily, but it was really beautiful to find that out. We also had a lot of snails, and that's new to a lot of Brooklyn kids. And so being able to like, and as a teacher, I don't think twice. I just pick up snails and show them, and kids are like, we can't touch you ever again in life. So.
Do they know in certain cultures people eat them?
Yeah, of course, I showed them. I showed them. Yeah, so it was just like, yeah, it's a fun time. So we're ending up that experience. Yeah. And hi there, Steph. I see you, Steph. Steph, wanted to check in. I want to make sure that I am visible on the big screen there. I know that sometimes when I share my screen, it doesn't show my picture next to the big screen in the auditorium, and I know that's a setting that the people on your end have to adjust on their broadcasting computer. So I just wanted to make sure we did that as well. But again, for those of you who are just joining, I don't know if folks in the auditorium can hear, but just wanted to like welcome all of you here. Very exciting for me. I'm thrilled to be here. Hi, Ms. Drager. Good to see you. Exactly. Okay, Ms. Fisher, you're clearly my dance partner. Like, I'm a Zoom dancer. So I've spent the last year and a half dancing, doing anything that I can to entertain young people on Zoom. And so I've become this Zoom dancer. So I'll be talking to adults, and they're like, do you know that you're dancing right now? And I'm like, that's just how I talk on Zoom now. I just dance because 7th graders will not listen to you unless you got moved. So that's just where I am. Awesome. And thank you to those people in the Performing Arts Center. So excited to see you all. And we've got some time until go time, so we've got a few moments to get started. So please make yourself as comfortable as possible. Get your tea or your juice or whatever it is that you need. Feel free to, like, I know one of the things I always have to do, like my pre-Zoom calisthenics. So if you've got to do your pre-Zoom stretches, like make sure you've got all that. But it is just so exciting to be working alongside all of you today. So I'm here just kind of standing by, but if anyone needs anything, you can certainly unmute, let me know in the chat, or raise your hand, but it is just really fantastic to see you.
Hello, if you could find your seats, Cornelius Minor is ready to go in exactly about 2.5 minutes.
Everyone could make their way back to their seats, please. If you could all make your way back to your seats, please. Thank you. Cornelius, this is Steph. Can you hear me? Okay, good, good. Okay, Cornelius, there are people going like fangirl over here. I just want you to know that.
Well, I'm such a fan of all of them. Like, my goodness, I have really been following your work for so long. And so to be able to be in Sun Prairie, like for real right now, I am having an experience over here. So I love you back. This is so exciting.
And we'll bring you back some other time when you can come face to face. Everybody wants their books signed, so because we've been reading you. So, all right, so team, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you to this year's keynote speaker. A couple of logistical aspects of our work. Because Cornelius is teaching concurrently, some of us live and some of us remotely, he will use both a chat and an invite your voice into the room function. So there will be times that he'll ask us to share thoughts. For those of you following from a remote environment, feel free to use the chat. For those of you here in the PAC, Shandu has a mic, Nick has a mic. Where's Nick? Nick has a mic, and Rick has a mic up in the auditorium areas, or not auditorium, what am I trying to say? Balcony, thank you, that word escaped me, the balcony area. And so when Cornelius asks us to engage, just wave your hand, and whomever is closest with the mic will make their way to you. And those of you that are participating remotely, feel free to use the chat function. Okay, everybody good? All right. Well, it is my sincere pleasure to welcome Cornelius. I have had the amazing opportunity to learn from and with him multiple times. And when Aloy and I were talking about whose voice do we need to hear as we re-engage? Oh, it's Cynthia. Cynthia, what do you... You know, Cornelius, some of us will do anything to get to talk to you. Stand up, Cynthia. What did you need to say? Cynthia clearly needs to say something, Cornelius. Hold on.
Hi. Okay. I'm so excited that you're here, but I'm a little in love, but I should not say that. But
Cynthia,
welcome.
I love you back. Like, love is all good.
You know, Cornelius, maybe 4 mics was not a good idea for this afternoon session. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hey, Cynthia, like, can I talk back to Cynthia? Can I say something? And actually, this is how I've been thinking about all of you, like, and I just totally took it over. Like, so apologies, we'll get back to intros in a minute. But one of the things that I am really learning as we start this year, and we'll get to talk lots about this today, and I often quote my mother when I say this. So Cynthia, this is for you and for everybody, that like, we've all had just like one hell of a year. Like, you know, I am coming back to the start of the 2021 school year, and in so many ways I feel like I am still nursing my wounds from the 2020 school year. And so as I welcome all of you back, one of the things I did want to start with is the reality that, like, as I look out on this room, like, I love you. Like, that is a real thing right now. See? Like, you know,
he loves me, man.
Yeah, like,
loves me. In front of everybody.
Cornelius, please don't do that to Cynthia. She has to go back and lead a building. We can't have her fainting today, all right? So I'm going to try this again. As you've already heard, I just want to say that as Aloy and I were thinking about voices we'd like to bring in the room, Cornelius came to mind. And if you haven't had the pleasure of learning with and from him yet, you'll know why as you hear him this afternoon. So welcome, Cornelius. We feel blessed to have you spend some time with us, and we look forward to learning from you. And I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, just thank you all for being here. And like, what a better way to start than like literally declaring our love for each other. Like, seriously, like, things have been, it's just been, the last 17 months have been huge. Huge in ways that have moved us to tears, huge in ways that have helped us to face fears and frustrations. And so as we start this year, you know, this is my 21st year in education. And every year I start with a sense of energy and warmth and excitement. And this year I have all of those things, but then I also have worry and I also have fear. And so as we face those things together right here, right now, I think it is important to name early and often, because educators do not hear this often enough, that like, I love you, I love you, I love you. That everything that we do today will be in that spirit. I think it's really important. One of the things that my mom used to say to me all the time when I was a kid coming up, she used to say, Cornelius, if there are people in this world who can hate you for no reason, then I am allowed to love you for no reason. And so much of what we do, and I know it sounds silly to start here now, but I'll back it up with research and statistics and all that later on. But I did want to start by welcoming you as warmly as I could. It is so, so beautiful to see you. That again, we are here. Some of us after a summer where there was little rest, we are here. Some of us after a summer where we just had to unplug to get away from all of the things, but we are here. And so thank you for being here alongside me today. I want to jump right in. Does that feel okay for everybody? You can give me a thumbs up. Let me know. We good? We good? All right, awesome. Well, I want to jump right in and get started. And I've built our day today really in two halves. So the first half of our day is really thinking about how we kind of position ourselves for the journey ahead. That this year, I'm having to position myself differently than I ever have. And so really the first part is how we position ourselves. Then we'll take a quick break at halftime. And then after halftime, we'll come back and really think about the work that will be student facing, like how we then speak to students, how we work with students, how we hope or aspire to move students, given how we position ourselves. So that will be our time together today. But here is where I want to start. Now, we are here together really thinking about what it actively means to partner with children. That we know now more than ever that the learning and the work that we do is not to kids, it is alongside kids. And so really today I want to study with you what it means to learn in partnership with children. And everybody can see my screen and hear me all right. If you can give me, again, a thumbs up. I want to make sure that we are nimble. Okay, awesome. You all are so beautiful. Thank you. And so here's where my thinking starts. And I really want to orient everything that I share today in my own experience, that so much of us have weathered incredible storms this year, right? You know, that I am in Brooklyn, New York, and in a tiny neighborhood called Fort Greene, where I live and work alongside my wife and my two kids. And this year, my two kids were remote. And so much of the work that I did was from home, right? And so much of my life usually is plugged into community and plugged into the children in my community. And so when all that was taken away from us by COVID and by us wanting to be safe, it's a really hard year. You know, typically this time of year, I'm skateboarding all over the city with kids. I've got a picture here of some of my students here, but again, all of those things have evaporated, right? As we seek to be safe. And as we're making our way safely back to school, so much of my year has been spent advocating on behalf of teachers and children around the world. So like I have appeared in, you know, many places on Zoom, and I have like partnered alongside organizations like the International Literacy Association or like NPR or NBC. And just so much of the work has been bigger than just our schools and our communities. And I really sought to get my arms around what it means to educate kids right now. But the work that I want to do with you today does not start here. It starts in a very different place. I want to take you all back to the very beginning, because we're in this auditorium, we're on this Zoom, talking right now about beginnings. And so I wanted to start at my beginning. That this photo that you see on the screen here is me on my very, very first day in the profession. So this is me before writing books, before all of the literacy coaching. This is me, young Cornelius, on my way to my very first day of teaching. So this is me at Florida A&M University, a small college in northern Florida where I got my undergraduate degree in English education. And so this is me, fall 1999. This was my last year of undergrad. And so this is the year where instead of going to traditional classes, this was the year that I started my student teaching. So what you see on the screen is me, and this is me the morning. I'm on my way to a second grade classroom. I was working in a wonderful second grade classroom led by Miss Cates in Leon County, Florida. And so this is me on my way to Miss Cates' room that morning. And that morning, my entire, my friend group and folks in my dorm, because I was the first one to get a real job, right, as a teacher. So people in my friend group came down to wish me well as I was on my way to work. So you notice in this picture, I'm the only one wearing a tie. I'm the only one dressed up because everybody else is going back to their classes to finish out senior year. But this is me on my way to student teaching in 1999. And I got to shout out Florida A&M University. I'm a proud alum of Florida A&M University. And Florida A&M University is a tiny college in North Florida with a big legacy. We're known for many, many things, but the thing that I am proudest of is that Florida A&M University is, again, a tiny historically Black college in Northern Florida, is known for graduating more Black teachers than almost any other institution in our country. So I am one of a very proud tradition of African and African American and West Indian teachers who have come from Florida A&M to teach all over the country. And so this is my beginning. So on this morning, I leave my campus and I make the trek across town to a tiny second grade classroom where I spent the rest of the year student teaching. And this morning was a morning full of hope and expectation. It was a morning full of fear, but it was a morning that I got through, and I made my way into that second grade classroom. Again, this is 1999. I make my way into that second grade classroom, and I start my teaching day. And later on that morning, this is before lunch, I get, and I don't know what it's called when it shows up on a pager because this is before cell phone, but I get a page on my pager. I call my friend back, and later on this morning, this happens, that my beautiful campus full of aspiring teachers, my beautiful campus, a historically Black campus in Northern Florida, was bombed by a white supremacist. Now I'm a student leader at this time, so I rushed back to campus. My collaborating teacher let me go. I rushed back to campus to see after my friends. And so this is the newspaper clipping from that day, that's September 23rd, 1999, the day that my campus, where I had made my home for 4 years, was attacked. And so I spent the rest of the day searching for my friends. Again, this is before cell phones, so you had to actually find people to make sure that they were okay. So I spent the rest of the day searching for my friends, getting phone cards to call worried parents at home who were worried about our safety and our well-being. And so as I organized my friends and I organized people on campus, the question emerged in my mind, why? Why would somebody do this to a campus full of people who just want to be teachers? Why would someone do this to a group of people who just want to live their lives on carpets, reading books with children? Why would this happen to me, right? And as I grappled with these really intense questions, I learned perhaps the most valuable lesson that I have learned in all of education. That's how I wanted to start our time together this morning. That in this moment, as I grappled with my own fear, as I grappled with my impulse to care for the people in my community, I realized, especially as I looked to my teachers and professors, that our work as educators is more than just lesson plans, classroom management, and assignments. That as I recovered from this traumatic moment, here is what I learned. I needed so much support that in this difficult moment, I needed safety and security. I needed ways to feel good about myself and about my community. And I also needed the tools to ensure that I could build a world that was better than the one that I was currently standing in. As I tried to make sense of this moment, I needed awareness and understanding. I needed space to process the world around me, and I needed ways to express my feelings in the ways that made sense to me. I needed ways to understand all of the people who might be experiencing that same world, but in profoundly different ways, right? I also needed connection, that as I made my way through that difficult moment, I needed ways to connect what I was learning in class to the realities that I was seeing all around me. And I needed proximity to people and to ideas who could affirm me. And I needed proximity to people and to ideas who could challenge me. Now, here's the thing. As we look into the next few weeks, our students need the very same thing. And so I made my way through that year. So fall of 99, I ended up graduating in the spring of 2000 to start my career. young educator moving back home to really think about what contributions that I could make. And so I looked out onto a world full of possibility in 2000 when I walked out of undergrad and into this profession. And I remember, establishing my own classroom and working to ensure that my kids felt safe and to ensure that my kids felt like they were growing. And so just as I am making my early steps into the profession, this happens. I, again, early in my career, am greeted by incredible tragedy. And I'm thinking about this lots as we near the 20th anniversary of this event. And as I looked out on my learners then, I realized again what I had realized just a few months earlier in Florida, that our work as educators is more than just lesson plans, more than classroom management, more than just assignments. That as I looked at my own students on this September morning, and I allowed myself to feel the fear and sadness, I realized that my students needed the same thing that I needed just months before. They needed safety and security. They needed awareness and understanding. They needed connection. And so as I talk to you this morning, as we think about how we start our year, I am realizing that the world is still a very complicated place. That we are not facing contemporary acts of terrorism today, but we're emerging from a pandemic that has robbed kids of opportunities to be with one another, and in some ways have robbed kids of loved ones, right? And so as we look into this year, our kids right now need what I needed in 2001, need what my students needed in 2001, need what I needed in 1999. That as we look into this year, the students that we are preparing to serve need safety and security, awareness and understanding and connection. And here's the thing, that the world will always be a complicated place. And kids are always going to need these things. So these are not just lessons that we save or warehouse away for tragedy. These are things that we can embody every day. And I hope to spend a little bit of our time over the next few minutes doing that alongside you today. But I want to start with a bit of a question. That we've talked about needs, we've talked about things that feel important. And as you prepare yourself to welcome in young learners in a few short days, what are the things that you know that kids will need as they make their way back this year? I want to give you just a little bit of time to consider this. And so I'll give us about 90 seconds to consider this. Again, what are the things that you know that kids are going to need as they make their way back this year? But most importantly, what are the things that you need? That I am reminded time and time again that I cannot pour from an empty cup. That I have to make sure that I am solid and loved and fulfilled so that I can give to children. And you and I share that understanding. So I want to give us 90 seconds just to catalyze our thinking today. And so in this 90 seconds, I would love for you to think. And I know that thinking looks different for each person. So for some of us, thinking means that I am sitting and enjoying my own silence. For others of us, thinking means that I might be talking to someone sitting near me and sharing ideas. For others of us, thinking might mean that I am jotting down ideas in a notebook. And for some of us, thinking might mean that I'm moving or pacing around the room. Whatever thinking feels best for you, that's the thinking that I invite you to do right now. What are the things that you know that kids need as they make their way back this year? And most importantly, what are the things that you need? We'll come back together in 90 seconds. So we'll take just a few more seconds to think. Just wanted to give you a time check. But again, there are so many ways that thinking can go. So thinking can sound like conversation, can look like scribbling on a page, can feel like movement in the aisles. So whatever way you think best, I always invite you to do that. And so as you have thought about student needs, as you have considered your own needs, I'm going to ask you in your notebook to hold tightly to those things as we work today. That those are the things that I want to make sure that we protect and that we speak to. So there'll be so many opportunities today where I'll ask you to think alongside me and to share your ideas, but please hold on to those two things as we move through our time together. But I'm so honored and excited to be sharing with you today. And I want to start by acknowledging that so much of the wisdom that I am sharing right here and right now has been bolstered by what I have read. That there are no experts in a pandemic. No one in our generation has taught through what we have had to teach through. And so I've leaned on the wisdom of so many friends that I am bringing into this conversation. So as I start today, I just want to acknowledge that so much of like my learning these last few months has come from people like Liz Kleinrock in her book, Start Here, Start Now, that I am leaning on the wisdom and work of Sarah K. Ahmed and her book, Being the Change. I'm also drawing from the incredible wisdom of Melanie Meehan and Kelsey Sorum, who is in the auditorium right now, who is one of my favorite people, so shout out to Kelsey. But like I'm drawing on so much of Kelsey's wisdom in her book, The Responsive Writing Teacher. And I think it's really, really important that as we make our way through this pandemic, again, there are no experts, right? That we lean on the wisdom and the experience of our friends as we move through this work together. And so here's where I want to start for us as we think together, and you're holding on to the things that feel so necessary for you and so necessary for kids, that this is the organizing question that I have really kind of built for our time together today. Again, children need educators and community members who work from the understanding that our world right now, our world always, is very complicated. And so how do we create the kinds of learning experiences that consistently deliver the love that we talk about, that consistently deliver the student-centeredness that we talked about, the responsiveness that we talk about, the growth that we talk about. And so really that's what we're grappling with as we make our way through today. Now, a couple of things that I want to acknowledge as we face the dawning of this school year, that right now, we are being asked to do what we used to do. As we think back to what school was pre-2020, we're being asked to do all of those things, but now with less time and with fewer resources. And because none of us have ever done this before, we're being asked to do all of this work with very little direction. And I want to acknowledge, I would be, criminally wrong if I did not acknowledge that all of this is so stressful. So as we start the year with incredible promise on the one hand, that feeling of unknown stresses us out a bit. And as I think about getting back to the kids that we all love, one of the things that I know is that we cannot pass this stress on to children by doing to them what the world is doing to us as educators. And so as we start today, there are a few points of consideration that I wanted to share with you as we really kind of start our way through this year. That I think it's important to name early, right here, right now, that expecting kids to do the same amount of work that they have done in years past is a flawed expectation. That we, who know the journey that kids have been on in these last 17 months, can still have very high expectations of kids. But those expectations can be humane and realistic and flexible. We know that learning is not a do your work transaction, right? And so when we think about how learning goes, it's not, hey, you kid, do this work and turn it back into me so that I give you a grade. That's a transaction, and that's not all learning is. We know when we study child development, we know, so all our Piaget fans in the house, we know that learning is relational, right? And so that we can construct experiences this year, every year, that lean on that understanding. I also know, and I've shared this with almost anyone who would listen, right? That giving 100% of myself every day is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for us or for kids. And one of the things that I've really grappled publicly with over these last few months is that and for those of you who know my work, you know I am a chronic overachiever, right? That one of the things that I have shared and really wrestled with in a big way is that I'm the kind of teacher where if I can have a perfect 10 teaching day on Monday, I want to have a perfect 10 teaching day on Monday. And if I could follow that up with a perfect 10 teaching day on Tuesday, you know, I just watched the Olympics. I'm all about the perfect 10. I want to follow it up with a Tuesday that's a perfect 10 and a Wednesday that's a perfect 10. But here's what I know. If I have perfect 10 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then I am dead by Friday. And so I am thinking about how I start this year by building sustainable habits and practices that allow me to get through the year. And so I am teaching myself actively how to choose my effort and how to calculate how I'm going to invest my energy as I move through the school year. That you know, in a real way, I have been rationing my energy. I've really been thinking, okay, a 50-point week, perfect 10 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, a 50-point week is impossible. So as I sit with my partner in the evenings to prepare for the week ahead, one of the things that I've been doing is I've literally been giving myself 40 points to spend across a week. Because again, understanding that a 50-point week might deflate me, I think about, okay, if I start with a perfect 10 on Monday, then that means that I might need to follow up with a Tuesday that's a solid 7, or a Wednesday that is a 6 or a 9. So I'm really thinking about how I'm going to invest my energy across the week. I build priorities and I invest in the things that I prioritize high. Now, here's the thing, that this stance is not lazy. This stance is not irresponsible. We know that rationing is what responsible people do in extreme situations. I often cite those heroes on the American home front during World War II. So we consider those women who went to work in factories when the men were fighting in Europe. We consider the women who kept victory gardens, the women who rationed food and materials. And here's the thing, their rationing made them heroes, because rationing is an active investment in your future. I know that if I eat all my food on Wednesday, I ain't got nothing left for Friday. The same applies to our teacher energy, that I am thinking in very articulated ways how I make my way into this year and how I make my way through this year in ways that are sustainable and responsible. But then I also think about all that we learned from the methodologies of the last 17 months. I think about the remote methodology, the hybrid methodology, the in-person methodology, that we can construct classroom-based experiences that speak to learning targets and standards without undermining the very human needs that all of us have right now. That these are 3 of the big ways that I am working this year. And I'm handing them to you as we construct our way forward, as we stand on this threshold of this new year. Now, I want to share kind of my framework. You know, how do I step into this? What does this look like practically? It's one thing to talk about what it can feel like ideologically, but I want to be really intentional that you all have been so generous with your time in this auditorium and on this Zoom. And so I want to be really intentional about handing you practical things that you can put to work for you right away. That as we start our journey into this year, it is no secret that this journey is defined by the uncertainty of this moment. That there is so much that we have planned for, there is so much that is certain, yet there are still so many unknowns. And I am a planner, and so the unknown scares me. And so as I have had to think about how do I prepare myself for the unknown, I've chosen to do it in this way. So as I construct plans for what my journey will be this fall, I wanted to share them with you. That the 4 things that I am making space for in my thinking is I'm of course making space for my own energy and my capacity. You know, given what we just talked about, this idea that I can't give it all. So I've had to work on establishing priorities and setting boundaries, that's a part of my planning, right? And doing that in articulated ways. There are so many times in school where we talk about self-care, but then we don't build the structures that actually allow for our self-care. So before the kids even come, this is what I'm thinking about right now. I am working with my team, I'm working with all of you to really think about how do we build an expectation that we can't give it all, and how do we actively talk publicly about our priorities and the boundaries that we're building so that we can be whole humans. But that's just a fourth of it. That I'm also leaning on what we know about kids and young people. That we have children, members of our school communities, who have only known our schools in times of struggle. And so one of the things that I am planning actively for this year is how I am building a sense of belonging every day, not just in the beginning of school, not just in the first few days, how I am actively investing every day to cultivate a sense of belonging, working to repatriate kids back to an in-person school community. That's important work. That again, so many of our kids have only known our community in times of struggle. I even consider my own two daughters. I have a second grader and a fourth grader in my house that when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, my youngest daughter was in kindergarten. And so she has never known a school year that has not been impacted by the tragedy of our moment, has not been impacted by the hardship of our moment. My oldest daughter was a second grader. She's entering her fourth grade year, so she's only, the bulk of her schooling has happened in these times defined by our struggle to meet the needs of students. And so much has to happen to really help kids feel at home and welcome in school. And we get to do some of that work together today. But then we also get to spend time thinking together today about curriculum and about learning outcomes, understanding that when we return, when kids come back to our carpets, when kids come back to their desk, when kids come back to our math lessons and our gym lessons and our music lessons, that this is not a game of catch up. That what the world has labeled as learning loss does not exist. That we know that learning does not stop just because the doors of our schools were temporarily closed. We know that learning is not a byproduct of school. Rather, learning is a part of the human condition. And we all watched through Zoom cameras as our kids learned how to take care of siblings, as our kids learned how to engage in chores at home to support their families, as our kids learned how to make priorities and set goals and expectations on their own, as our kids learned how to reinvent what learning could be in their own life. So our kids have learned so much alongside us. Our kids have learned so much despite us. And so to insult them by naming a thing as learning loss seeks to invalidate all the learning that they have done. Now, of course, kids were not engaged in the math lessons that I had planned for them. They were not engaged in the writing or reading lessons that I had planned for them. But all of those are things that we can work on when they are back with us in a few short days. I'm thinking lots about the incredible work done by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTee in their book, Understanding by Design. We know that the path forward is about identifying exactly where kids are and establishing a plan to move them forward. That forward momentum that we can measure, forward momentum that kids can be proud of is the goal here, not catch up to some arbitrary benchmark or goal that we established before a pandemic. And so really thinking about how we move kids forward as beautifully and as dramatically as possible while maintaining the joy and the love that is inherent to the learning that you all already cultivate there. But then also, part of our planning today must lean on the reality that life happens. So we've got to also plan for the surprises, plan for the unexpected. So yes, I am planning for, our own energy. I'm planning for cultivating a sense of belonging. I'm planning for curriculum and learning outcomes, but I'm also planning for the surprises. That life happens, our employers are going to make important demands, our own families are going to need us, things are going to come out of nowhere. And so I want to make space in our lives, in how we invest our time for those surprises. So one of the things that I'm doing, and you all know, I'm the leader of a 7th and 8th grade team on this side of things. But one of the things that I'm doing is I am making space in every agenda for us to address the things that might surprise us. And so in every agenda that I craft for my grade team, in every agenda that I craft for my department, I'm leaving a little bit of time and space for the unexpected, that we know that surprises will come. We don't know what they'll be, but we know that they'll come. And so planning for that is really, really important. I want to pause here just to check in. How are these 4 components with you? Like these are kind of the 4 components that I am bringing into the year. How are we doing? We're okay? You can, again, shoot me a thumbs up. Let me know we're doing all right here. We're good? Awesome, 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 awesome. And so these 4 components. So I want to give us just a moment to consider these. And so here's how I want to set up this moment of consideration or reflection that I want to just like invite you to reflect for a bit. And as I invite you to reflect, there are 3 questions that I hope will guide your reflection. This will be a little bit of a longer reflection. This will be a 3-minute reflection. And here's how I would love for you to think. There are, again, just like 3 questions that I want you to consider. First of all, like, what is being confirmed for you this morning? Or now this afternoon? What's being confirmed for you? So we've studied together just a bit, and many of you come to this work like I do, after careful consideration, after years of really thinking about kids. And so what's been confirmed for you? Second question, what new ideas or thoughts are emerging for you? And then third, what questions or wonderings do you have? Now I want to give us 3 minutes just to consider these questions. And as we think about what we've mentioned or talked about so far, what's being confirmed for you, what new ideas or thoughts are emerging, and what questions do you have? And here's how this is going to work. I'm simply going to give you 3 minutes to think. And I know that 3 minutes is not enough time to have robust thinking, but hopefully this is enough time to catalyze some ideas. And so 3 minutes just to consider, again, what's being confirmed for you, what new ideas or thoughts are emerging, what questions do you have? And then after the 3 minutes, we're going to come together to share a few ideas. And I'll invite us to share in the way that feels most comfortable for you. So there are microphones there in the auditorium. There's the chat feature here on the Zoom. You can also, if you're on the Zoom alongside me, you can unmute and share. And there are also people who are facilitating the microphones that if you don't feel comfortable talking on the mic, you can hand your question or your idea or your thought to that person. So we'll take 3 minutes to think, and then we'll come together to share our thinking. So what is being confirmed? What new ideas or thoughts are emerging? What questions do you have? As we know, thinking can look any number of ways. So thinking can be you sitting in silence. Thinking can be you talking to a friend. Thinking can be you jotting in those beautiful new notebooks that were just handed out in the auditorium, right? Thinking can be you pacing the aisle. Whatever ways that you think best, I invite you to do that thinking over the next 3 minutes. You can start now. just wanted to do a quick time check. We've got about 70 seconds left. So about 70 seconds left in our thinking time. As we make our way to the end of this short period of thinking time, I would love to welcome many of you to the conversation. As you thought about what's being confirmed for you in this moment, as you considered new ideas or thoughts that were emerging, as you even pondered what questions are emerging for you, I would love for you to share those ideas. And so we've got, again, microphones in the room. We have a chat feature in the Zoom. You can unmute on the Zoom. There are also really amazing facilitators in the room who can help to bring your idea or your comment to the group. And so I'll pass to the team there in the Performing Arts Center.
We have a question from the upper deck.
So you probably can't see me, but I just have a quick question. It was about preparing for surprises. And one thing that I was wondering is, sometimes when we are trying to prepare for the unexpected, like how do you get past the initial, like kind of reliving the trauma of like the roadblocks that we that we put up, like, oh, here it is again. So how do you get past like the blocks that we put up to actually prepare for surprises?
Absolutely. That's the thing that I think a lot about. Again, I shared with you all earlier how so much of my career was literally born from trauma and born from the challenges associated with teaching during extraordinary times. And so this is a thing that I've actually spent lots of time in therapy considering. Like, how do I respond to difficulty? How do I respond to challenges without revisiting that trauma every time? And so I, over the years, have developed a really kind of predictable approach to it. And anyone who's ever worked alongside me knows this, but like one of the things that I do is first I name the pain associated with the surprise. And so I've had to teach myself that it is okay to say, this new citywide mandate came out of nowhere and it took me by surprise. I'm really frustrated right now. So it's okay to name how I feel. And in teaching, we don't often give ourselves that space. And so I have a kind of a recipe for it. So I spend about 10% of my response time, so not a huge amount of time, but I spend 10% of my response time just naming my feelings. This thing happened and I'm pissed, or this thing happened and I'm terrified, or this thing happened and I'm confused. I think that those are okay things. And so I am working in all educational spaces to normalize that practice. That as teachers, we aren't often given space to be afraid. We aren't often given space to be confused. We're not often given space to not know. So that's a practice that I normalize in all groups that I work with, just naming my feelings. Now that's 10% of the time. So that means that I move on. Once I've named and acknowledged my feelings, I'm still allowed to feel them. But then my second step is I want to get to work. Now, getting to work, I have built the getting to work part around priorities. Whenever there is a surprise, one of the things that happens in education is that surprises have historically knocked us off course when we're thinking about making movement toward our priorities. And so here's what schools tend to do. We tend to do a really good job of saying at the start of the year, when everything is lovely, we say that these are our priorities. These are the things that we're working toward. And then one surprise happens and it knocks us off course. So we end up working in ways that might not meet the priorities that we stated earlier in the year. So I've really been thinking about what our priorities actually mean. and I have been working to hold steadfast to this priority. So I'll show you an example that I, a week and a half ago, just sat with my 7th and 8th grade team. Again, I am a 7th and 8th grade coach, and I just sat with my team. And the conversation was all about getting ready for those surprises. We don't know what they're going to be yet in New York City. And just like you don't know what they're going to be there in Sun Prairie. But to say that we know they're going to come. And so here's how, and I'm going to put it on the screen here. Here's how we established our priorities. Now I'm sharing, actually, let me pull this down just for a moment. I'm sharing my team priorities with you just to answer the question, but I'm sharing this as an example. I don't want anybody to think, oh, these are Cornelius's priorities, so these have to be my priorities, but I'm just sharing this as an example, that these are the priorities that we have brainstormed here after really thinking about our community and after thinking about our kids. And so you're gonna have priorities that you brainstorm there as you think about your kids and about your community. So I am simply sharing my priorities as an example. This is not to say these must also be your priorities. I always want to be really clear about that, that these are the priorities that my team and I have brainstormed together so that we can best anticipate. Well, we can't anticipate the nature of the surprise, but we can anticipate our response to the surprise. And so this is me and my team working to anticipate how we respond to surprises. Let's see here. So these are some of the priorities that we set for ourselves, that we really asked ourselves after the year that we've experienced and based on what we know about our kids, what can our priorities be? And we as a team decided that teacher and kid well-being is our top priority, that's a decision that we came to together. That this year has been harrowing for teachers and kids, and we decided that there is nothing more important than ensuring our own well-being. Now, the second thing, and this was a very close second, is academic growth. We know that learning loss is not a thing, but we do want to ensure that when kids come back this year, that every kid is a year better as a result of their time with us, a year or more. And so that means that some kids that we meet, and again, I'm in 7th and 8th grade. And so the reality is that we might meet some kids who are at the 6th grade level or at the 5th grade level or at the 4th grade level. So we are going to work monumentally hard, no matter where kids are, to get them a year or more better in every category, right? So that academic growth really matters to us. Community stability is a priority for us, that so much change. If you follow the news and you watch what was happening in New York City, it feels like we had 8 first days of school last year. First, we were fully remote, then we were hybrid, then we were back remote, then we tried to be in person for like 5 minutes, but then we were back hybrid and remote, and so I was always reinventing myself, right? And so we want kids to have a sense of stability this year. And so that's a priority. Responsiveness, innovation, professional growth and care, all of these are priorities. But then here was our conversation. As we anticipate the unknown, as we anticipate surprises, our conversation started like this, that we know that things are going to get hard this year. We know that. We don't know how they're going to get hard, but at some point this year, things are going to feel hard. And so when things feel hard, we're going to acknowledge our feelings, but then we're going to take a look at our priorities. When things feel hard and it feels like we can't move forward, we're going to drop priority number 6 temporarily. Priorities 1 through 5 are going to stay intact, but when things get hard, we're going to drop priority number 6 and focus on the hard thing for a few days, a few weeks, and then we're going to pick priority number 6 back up. Because we've prioritized it low, priority 6 has to go if things get hard. We also know that there are going to be times where things get very hard. And when things get very hard, we have decided as a team publicly that we're going to drop priorities 5 and 6. So when things get hard, in order to create space for us to respond and space for us to be healthy, we're dropping 5 and 6. Now, all of these are priorities for us, but here's what happens in school. In school, we're good at taking things on. We're not so good at letting things go. And so as a leader, as somebody who has worked through challenge after tragedy, after hardship, I am teaching myself that it is okay to temporarily let some things go while we respond to pressing issues. Now, one of the things that we also know is that at some point this year, things are going to feel impossible. That there were times last year where I would get up out of bed and be afraid to walk to my computer. I would be terrified of logging onto the Zoom just because things felt paralyzingly impossible. We're going to have moments like that again this year. That I am the eternal optimist. I love students. I love my colleagues. But there will be impossible moments this year. But here's what my team and I have decided, that in the moments that feel impossible, in order to better respond, we're going to drop priorities 3 through 6 temporarily so that we can attend to the impossible. So what that means is priority 1 and 2 will remain intact while we attend to the impossible. And then we're going to take a few days to attend to the impossible. And then we reintroduce those priorities. And so I've taken a very systemic approach to this, a 2-part approach that really, first part is acknowledging how we feel, acknowledging the fear, the frustration, the anger, whatever the feelings are, that those things are real and important. And if they are not acknowledged, they tend to fester, right? And so we've all read kind of Langston Hughes's poem about dreams deferred. So like just naming like how like we feel and then acting on that by shifting priorities. And that's why establishing priorities helps us to make healthy boundaries around our work. So we are very clear in our expectations of each other and in our communication with each other, that if things get hard, we're dropping priority number 6. If things get very hard, we're dropping 5 and 6. If things get impossible, we're dropping priorities 3 through 6. So just being really clear and upfront so that everybody on the team knows what the deal is and knows how to respond when things get difficult. I hope that feels helpful for folks. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
Hi. Oh, wow, that's loud. Thanks for being here
Hey there.
for all of us. One thing that I find is, it was my experience as a child, was that every year that I got older, I found it harder and harder and harder to be authentic and truthful with adults in my life and with other kids in my life. I felt like I had to just take what people were saying, and if it made me feel some type of way, I had to put it in a box and leave it there. And it wasn't until I was like reaching the professional world where I was like, oh my gosh, I've been putting things in boxes since I was in 3rd grade. And now I'm having to unpack it all as a grown-up because I have to unpack those things with my students. So I guess the question in there is, by the time they get to be 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, they're already facing that like social anxiety of, what's somebody going to think if I say how I feel? What's somebody going to think if I'm being authentic and true to the things I like? How do we combat that? Because it does start so much younger than I think, we're even aware of sometimes. How do we combat that and keep kids being truthful and authentic with themselves, with us, and with their peers?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. That hits me directly in the heart in so many ways, both as a parent and as an educator. And again, I, like you, have spent lots of time in my adult life unpacking the things that I packed away in my childhood. And so I can answer that question affirmatively in 2 ways. The first thing or the first gift that I want to give to my students is the gift of modeling. That when children have adults in their lives who can model being full humans, who can model being complicated, that's really, really important. And so many times kids lose a sense of who they are because the role models in their lives have lost the sense of who they are. And so there are 3 things that I plan to intentionally model for every group of kids that I encounter. The first thing that I always want to model for kids, and that this is often, and often that means that I think through things out loud in front of them. Now I plan for this ahead of time, so this is not me sharing my deepest, darkest life secrets, but rather this is me intentionally saying that to be a 3rd grader in America right now means that you've got to be able to sit with complicated feelings. That means that things are going to feel like happy and sad and angry and weird all at the same time, and that we're allowed to be that as humans, right? And so one of the things that I always want to do as often as I can is I want to model sitting with complicated feelings in front of kids. and having conflicting ideas and beliefs. That I want kids to see an adult saying that, like perfect example, last year, when I don't know if y'all remember, not even last 2 years ago, when we thought the pandemic was only going to be 2 weeks. I don't know if y'all remember, but like 2 marches ago, when people were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be out for this COVID thing," but 2 weeks later we'll be back to school. Like there was this brief moment of time where we thought that the pandemic would be 2 or 3 weeks, and we were mightily inconvenienced, right, at that time with the thought of possibly missing 3 or 2 weeks of school. And I remember it was like the second day, maybe, where things still felt kind of cool. I don't know if y'all remember, but people were baking bread and people were posting kind of their pandemic schedules on social media because we thought this thing was going to be like really fast. And I remember expressing to children like my conflicting feelings. That I was like, I'm excited a little bit that we don't have to be at school because this is a really heavy spring, but I'm also terrified that there's this pandemic that nobody knows about. But then I'm also looking forward to spending a little bit of time with my own children over the next 2 weeks until this pandemic is over, right? And so there were all of these like feelings that I had, and I was terrified about like job and opportunity loss, but then I was like thrilled about an opportunity for a reset. And so I wanted to model for kids that I'm feeling all of these feelings, right? Where I'm scared in some ways and I'm excited in other ways. And then I'm charmed by the idea that we get to play around with this new thing called Zoom, right? And so just helping kids to see that humans are complicated. The second thing that I want to model for kids is how to effectively deal with disappointment, anger, or sadness. That those are really important feelings, and that disappointment, anger, and sadness also has a home in our community, that you're allowed to feel those feelings. That so many times when kids feel those feelings, the immediate adult response is don't feel sad, don't be upset. And so my response is you're allowed to be upset right now. You're allowed to feel that feeling. And there's a thing that we can do with our anger. There's a thing that we can do with our feelings. So we're allowed to feel big feelings, and we can put them into writing. We can put them into activity. We can put them into art making. We can even put them into silence as we spend time being mindful in the corner. And so I want kids to see me processing my own big feelings. And so there are times throughout the year where I will share with kids, I'm having really big feelings about the new lunch schedule. So again, I'm not sharing with them the deepest, darkest secrets of my life, but I am sharing with them ways that I move through big feelings. And so again, I want them to know that adults can move through complicated feelings. I want them to know that adults can move through big feelings. And then I want them to see that adults can be unsure, and that we are willing and able to negotiate being unsure in public. That being unsure is a bit of a social taboo if you're a kid, right? It's a social taboo if you're an adult, that nobody knows what to do with that feeling of being unsure, right? And so that's a thing that I want to model for kids, that this is me being unsure about this read aloud. This is me being unsure about this math problem. This is me being unsure about who to sit next to at lunch. This is me being unsure about if I even look cool in this mask, right? Like, and so I want to model for kids like what it looks like to be unsure. And just like we model math problems and we show kids a path through math problems, I want to show kids a path through interpersonal problems. And I want to show kids that there's, that problems in life, even though they can feel big, are kind of predictable. And just like we invent recipes or approaches to deal with the problems that we find in math, we can invent recipes or approaches to deal with the challenges that we find in life. But those things are really, really big. And so I'm often inviting kids to think alongside me as I navigate child-size issues in front of them, that I want them to have that experience of helping me through an issue. So I'll often invite kids to do that thinking alongside me. I've already planned my first one for the fall. My first one for the fall is that being back in physical space after a long time away can feel really weird for kids. And one of the ways that kids like navigate the weirdness is by kind of asserting like dominance over other kids. So my idea, my paper, my game has to go first, right? And because I'm anticipating that, and kids are going to be feeling really weird about like how I assert myself in this like physical space now that we're all back socially together. And so one of the things that I'm sharing with them is how my sister and I have a hard time choosing which movie to watch on Netflix. And so I'm sharing with them that, yeah, things are difficult because I went without seeing my sister for a long time. And then when people started traveling this summer and she came to see me, it was really hard to figure out how to be. And so I had to work that out, and here's what I did. So I'm going to be working that out in front of kids, that here again is this kid-sized challenge that we can work on together, that here's our teacher having difficulty with his sister, and having to work through that. And so I can have difficulty with a classmate, and I have permission to be uneasy as I work through that. And so again, I hope that is helpful, but I've been really thinking in very intentional ways about how we move through those things and those challenges. Yeah. And all of that too is literacy, right? That we know that there are multiple kinds of literacy. And so I want to name, as we kind of transition here, that all of this is literacy, that kids, of course, we want them to be literate in books, but community literacy is just as important and powerful. And so I name those things. And when I plan for those things, I talk about, like, this is the portion of my day where we're going to be doing traditional academic literacy. And this is the component of my day where we're going to be doing some real social literacy, that those are big skills that we can build for kids. That if we build healthy and socially literate kids right now, we avoid big therapy bills later on in life. And so I am all about, that social literacy. We've got time for one more. Any last minute thoughts or questions or comments or wonderings? We're good. All right, awesome. And so here's what I want to do. So we spent this first component of our time together. We're at halftime now, and we spent this first kind of period of time together really thinking about how do we best position ourselves. We're going to take a quick break right now, and when we return from break, I really want to pivot to thinking about how we serve students powerfully. And so we've thought first about how we best position ourselves to serve powerfully. And then the second part is really going to be about, like, what does this mean for our work in front of students? And so here's how our break is going to go. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. And so I'm going to invite you to move around, take a bio break, greet some friends, say hi on the Zoom. And so right now I have exactly 30 after the hour. So we'll be back at 40 after the hour to resume our time together today. I want to thank you for being here, but beyond your thanks for your presence, I want to thank you for all that you are considering and all that you do for children. It is powerful to work alongside you today. I'll see you in 10.
if you could start making your way back to your seats. Cornelius has given us the 1 minute warning. 1 minute before we come back.
All right, we're in our last minute together, and so I just wanted to do a time check that we'll be coming back together in 1 more minute.
Okay, if everybody could return to their seats, please. If you can return to your seat.
Oh, you all turned off the lights in there. There's like mood lighting. Feels exciting. Well, again, as you're making your way back to your seats, thank you for being here. I am, again, just so honored to be working alongside you in this capacity. All right, so welcome back to all of you. Again, thank you for being here. It is a real treat to have this opportunity. I recognize how just important and precious these minutes before we start the school year are. And so I just want to thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you have invested in kids and community, but just for your presence here today. Again, I know that you all could have been anywhere, and so that you all are spending this time here learning together in this way means everything to me. So many thanks. I want to jump into this component of our time together today and really think about the student-facing part. We've talked a little about kind of how we make our way through this current moment, but I want to really honor the destination, that we are here so that students grow. We are here so that students can see themselves and feel powerful. We are here so that kids are more numerate. We are here so that kids are more literate, so that they have a better understanding of the arts and how to apply all of those things to life as they navigate the world of science and technology or the worlds of history, right? That we are here to serve kids in powerful ways. And as we start, there are a couple of things that I want to really just kind of name for us, that I want to start by thinking a little bit about the values that we all share in the district. The thing that I admire most about all of you there in Sun Prairie is just how committed you have been historically to kids, how committed you are to their learning, to their growth, to their, to the beauty of their childhood. And so there are a few big things that we share, and I want to start with those commonalities, right? That when we think about why we do this job, why we sometimes will work through adversity and challenge to serve kids, it's because you all there believe in human-centered care, that you all have historically been the community that puts people before policy every time. And so one of the things that I know that happens when we face hardship, the first thing that can go sometimes is our priorities, our beliefs. And so I wanted to start this component of our time together today by just like acknowledging the things that you already bring to the table. You all understand teaching, and you know that no one learns from just listening to a teacher talk. You all have really led the way in this district at understanding that children learn best when they have multiple opportunities to practice. And I want to call that to the forefront of our memories today as we work. You all also understand and we value that kids can express their knowing in different ways, and that all of those ways are valuable, right? And so that means the kid who writes a 5-paragraph essay to elaborate on their thinking is not somehow magically more capable than the kid who sketches a diagram or builds a model. And we can lead in ways that acknowledge this, right? You all also know that flexibility and innovation and creativity must continue to define our work, not fidelity to programs or to rules or to long established ways of doing things. That we're allowed to abandon yesterday's thinking if it does not serve the unique needs of right now. Also, we gather today to really celebrate the fact that meeting kids where they are really matters, right? And so this means that we center the kids who have been most marginalized by school, understanding that by striving to meet kids, not all kids will get the same thing because not all kids need the same thing. So those are a couple of big understandings that I'm bringing to our work together this afternoon as we work alongside one another. And I want to make some very clear connections too. That I'm so proud to be working alongside you, mainly just because you all have such an articulated and beautiful commitment to students. And when I think about how our commitment to students and our commitment to caring about kids connects to what we do in classrooms every day, I want to draw a line that connects those two things. So I want to talk about, on the one hand, yes, our incredible commitment to kids, but I want to talk about how that shows up in a classroom and how we act on that and how we live through that lens in a classroom. That it's really easy after seeing an attack or after hearing hurtful language, it's easy to see and to understand the potential for harm that can sometimes exist in communities. Seeing the potential for harm that might exist in our own schools is not as easy for some people. And so I want to make it plain today, right? I am channeling the words of my grandmother when she used to always remind me, Cornelius, if you can't see a thing, if you can't see a problem, you can't fix it, right? And so I want to really talk about what it means to see some potential for harm that might exist in our schools and how we can work truly in student-centered ways, how we live up to the words that we put on paper and the words that we put in our mission statements and on our letterhead, right? And so one of the things, and I've reflected a lot on my own practice these last few months. And one of the things that has happened in my experience, and I can only talk about my experience, but one of the things that has happened in my own experience is that sometimes we embrace approaches to teaching that do not see all children. And if you're anything like me, you know that often the reasoning is, well, this is how I'm supposed to do math, or this is how music has always been done, or this is what language arts is supposed to go like because the curriculum says, right? And so sometimes we embrace approaches to teaching that do not authentically see all kids. So instead of thinking about how we might remix or bend curriculum to meet the needs of children, sometimes what happens in school spaces is we demand that kids conform to us. And here's the thing, friends, this is not okay. And we know that it's not okay. Children also know that it's not okay. That sometimes children sit in desks, or sometimes children sit at the carpet, or sometimes children sit in their socially distant pods from one another, and they feel in their bodies that, yeah, this lesson isn't really working for me. Now, here's the thing. No kid ever is going to send us the well-worded email, right? Dear Mr. Minor, the way that you have constructed this lesson does not meet my needs as a learner. I wish that it were that simple, right? No kid ever is going to send me that email. Rather, and if you look at the second layer of this pyramid that I've drawn for you here, rather we see it in their behavior. We see it in their growth, right? The great Carla Shalaby, who wrote the book Troublemakers, says that in school settings, behavior is a form of communication. Right? And so we see it in their behavior, we see it in their growth, we see it in their engagement or lack thereof. And often what happens in school spaces when our curriculum or the experiences that we're building in class are an ill fit for the students that we're attempting to teach, we often read this communication and we label it, right? So we call it deficiency, we call it defiance, and we sometimes use these labels to sort and to segregate kids. And so what ends up happening in some school spaces is we treat children as if they are broken. So the conversation in those school spaces becomes all about how we fix the bad kids. Instead of reflecting inward and thinking about how we might remix or reimagine curriculum, what happens is blame gets shifted to children and to communities. Now here's why I wanted to share this process, and here's why I drew this pyramid on the screen for you. That this trend that I am describing happens disproportionately to multilingual children. It happens to children with learning disabilities and to kids from groups that have been historically marginalized in institutions like school. And so what ends up happening is this leads to less learning, which connects to so many other success indicators at school. And so ultimately, kids have fewer opportunities because of how we have historically done school. And so here's the operational kind of sentence in our work together this afternoon. That if the ways that school operates have historically harmed some people, then we can reimagine what it means to do school. I want to say that again, that if the ways that school operates have historically harmed some people, then we can be the ones to reimagine what it means to do school. That is what it means to be student-centered. That's what it means to co-construct learning alongside kids, is that we learn from them and we use what we learn from them to influence how we design experiences for them. That really that must be the heart of our work this year. And so the big question that I'm always wrestling with is how are we as school personnel, all of us, working together to make school a more accessible place for all learners? But that's what we get to spend the rest of our time doing today, right? And when I think about how that can go for us, there are a couple of big things that come to mind that I want to share with you as we think about being back. But I want to pause first. How we doing? We're doing okay? How we doing? You can shoot me an emoji, a thumbs up, like we're good in the auditorium, we're good? Excellent, excellent. Like, who's my team with the blue shirts in the front? Like, you all look great. I love that. Yeah, yes. That is incredible. Yeah. And so really that's kind of like the organizing part of how I want to move forward in thinking about how we can best serve kids as we enter this school year. And so there are a couple of big things that I want to just like share with you, a couple of big understandings that I am developing as I make my way through this moment. And again, as we all come back, it's important to name over and over again that there are no experts here, that we are all learning together. That's a beautiful thing. And as I learn alongside all of you, as I learn from mentors around the country, one of the things that I am discovering is that as we all attempt to rebuild school culture, it's important to acknowledge the school culture is not a single thing. The school culture is a lot of things happening all at once, and it is dynamic, right? And so as we kind of rebuild what it means to do school, we can remind kids how to do school, right? That there have been enough interruptions where that reminding is important now. But here's what complicates that reminding, that it's hard to remind kids how to do school, particularly because many of us are still learning how to do pandemic era schooling. And so as we work to remind kids how to do school, we've got to be attentive to what we're even feeling. Now, I can be transparent here. One of the things that I often feel, especially in moments like this, right, as we're welcoming kids back, I care a lot about them observing safety protocols. I care a lot about them learning as much as they can. And so sometimes when I'm trying to reestablish what school can be, I get really stressed out, right? And sometimes when I'm stressed out, I can be short with kids or impatient with kids. And I want to remind us that as we start, we can remind kids how to do school, but this teaching has to be as consistent as possible, but also loving and fun and affirming. As we reconstruct what it means to do school, we cannot do so in ways that are punitive or in ways that seek to shame or isolate kids. That as we build back, we can create a school that feels loving and fun and affirming while it feels consistent. And I want to caution us here as we kind of think about that building, because when we think about school culture, in many ways, kid culture has already defined itself in this moment. That when we think about pandemic era kid culture, it has defined itself with two things at its core. We know this from the child development, that when kids are stressed out, when kids feel lost or intimidated or unsure, there are two things that young people do. That young people like enter kind of a survival mode, we know this, right? And young people seek pleasure, right? And so when kids are confused, when things are irregular, when schedules are uncertain, young people go into survival mode and or pleasure mode. And so here's what that means for us. That means as kids walk back into our rooms, as kids walk back into our hallways, they are bringing that spirit of survival and pleasure with them, right? And so here's what that means. When faced with difficulty, again, when faced with things that are new, when faced with things that are uncertain, kids will cling to survival. And so here's how this plays out in classrooms, right? And many of us even noticed this spring, that the kids that we're used to working with, right, like to go above and beyond. They're overachievers. They aim to like really impress us. But what you probably noticed in the last 8 months particularly was that the kid that used to aim to impress us is now just getting by with the bare minimum. And here's the thing, that kid is not getting by with the bare minimum because they are somehow defiant or bad. They're getting by with the bare minimum because that's what survival dictates, that they're in survival mode. And so part of our work in this moment as we welcome kids back to school is recognizing that kids are going to be in survival mode for those first few days and weeks. And that part of our work is helping them to evolve out of survival mode back toward thriving, right? And so here's what this means. This can't happen in just a few days, right? That this is not, okay, 2 days of like activities and now we're out of survival mode. This is a process. We're going to be working to usher kids out of survival mode for the entire school year. And that's okay. Some kids will move faster than others, but part of our work, in addition to teaching and engaging kids, is recognizing that, okay, you're in survival mode right now, and I can help you to grow out of that. A second trend that you're probably experiencing right now, or you probably saw a lot of this spring, is that when kids are unsure or uncertain or stressed, they seek pleasure to alleviate that uncertainty. And so when I think about how that plays out in the classroom, one of the things that you've probably seen is there are kids in the middle of this moment who are telling jokes at the wrong time, who are speaking out of turn, who are walking around the room talking to friends when they shouldn't be, not because they're being defiant, not because they're trying to upset our day, but rather because they're pleasure seeking. And so when things feel uncertain, one of the ways that young people self-soothe is by seeking pleasure. The ill-timed joke, the inappropriate conversation with a friend when it's not time to be across the room, time spent walking around the room or laughing out of turn. All of these are things that can sometimes get right under my skin, but this is not kids being bad. This is not kids being defiant. Rather, this is kids seeking pleasure in the midst of uncertainty. And so part of our work this fall is helping them to grow past pleasure back toward productivity. Now, again, this is not an overnight process. This process can't happen in a few days. That this is the journey of our year. As we help kids to grow forward from this moment, we are growing through that idea of pleasure seeking. We are growing through that idea of survival. I want to make sure that makes sense for people. How does that feel for everybody? That's a huge concept that I tried to really kind of pull down, but that's a huge thing that I'm thinking lots about as kids make their way back into our spaces. And for those of us who are parents, you've probably seen this in your own children, right? That again, kids are not as focused on thriving as they're focused on surviving. The kids are seeking pleasure in opportune moments or at the wrong time. But again, this is not kids being bad. This is simply kids responding to the world as it is right now. Now, another thing that we know that I just want to lay down on the path ahead of us as we move into serving kids this year is the understanding that when kids are unsure, sometimes they choose silence or distraction. And this can feel really tricky in a classroom. Again, when kids are unsure, they sometimes choose silence or distraction. And so there have been so many conversations about ways to powerfully engage kids. And that word engagement is a tricky word right now. That people look at groups of kids and they say, oh, this one is engaged in math, but disengaged with reading. This one is engaged with writing, but disengaged with music. This one is engaged with physical education, but disengaged with science, right? There's all of this labeling that's happening with kids right now. And I want to caution us again against the labeling, because what we know again is when kids are unsure, they choose silence. And so here's what a kid is thinking, right? So if a teacher in math or if a teacher in writing asks me a question, or if my art teacher asks me a question, and I look around the art room, I, as a young person, as a kid, I am calculating the social risk involved with answering that question. That kids as young as kindergarten know that if I answer this question in a weird way or in the wrong way, my friends might laugh at me. People might not play with me on the playground. People might not choose to sit next to me at lunchtime, right? And so kids who are 5 and 6 and 7 years old are already old enough to do the mental calculations. If my teacher has asked me to do this thing and I do it, there's a risk involved with doing this thing. And so sometimes, as opposed to taking the risk, kids will opt into silence. Or sometimes kids will opt into distraction, that if I answer a question and get it wrong, that's going to make a scene and people are going to think less of me. If I make a distraction, people will laugh, right? And so kids make these calculations all the time. So, and what's interesting is this is not divesting from class. This is not being disengaged. Actually, these kids are very engaged, right? That they are so engaged that they can read the social ecosystem of the room. They are so engaged that they can play out hypothetical consequences for their actions, and they choose silence or they choose distraction because they understand the risk involved with showing up in class. And so that means when we welcome kids back to class, we have to welcome them back in a feeling and in the spirit of safety, that you're not just welcome here, but that you can take risk here and that nothing bad will happen when you take intellectual or academic or creative risk. Again, I want to pause just to make sure we're doing okay. How's this resonating for folks? We doing all right? All right? Awesome. And I want to give us just a moment to process, because it's a lot to share as we think about coming back. And it's a lot to juggle as a teacher. That one of the things that I've been thinking about is that these are things that we can work on together, that these aren't challenges that I have to shoulder by myself. And so as we think about being back, again, I want to ask the same 3 questions that we asked before. I want to give us about 2 minutes just to kind of think. And again, thinking can look any way. Thinking can be you sitting in silence. Thinking can be you talking to a friend. Thinking can be you walking around in the aisles. Thinking can be you sketching in your notebook. But what is being confirmed for you this afternoon? What new ideas or thoughts are emerging for you? And what questions do you have? I'm going to again just give us 2 minutes to think together, and then we'll come back together after thinking, share for a little bit, and we'll keep moving. And so I just want to take 2 minutes for us to share what's being confirmed, what new ideas or thoughts are emerging, what questions do you have. Take 2 minutes to think. You can think in the way that works best for you. And then when we come back in 2 minutes, we will think together. We've got a few more seconds, and so as you think, what has been confirmed for you, what's beginning to shift or change, what persisting questions do you have? We've got a few more seconds, and I'll open up the floor to allow people to approach the microphone or to, have a comment in the chat. But how are you doing? I want to make sure that I am leaving you with lots to consider and lots to do as we head back into our classrooms. So we'll take a few more seconds. And so for the incredible team there in the Performing Arts Center, for the amazing team of folks that I've got with me here on Zoom, what thoughts are emerging for you? So what's confirming? What new ideas are you having? What's shifting or changing? We'll take a moment to talk now.
Hi there. I can appreciate the comment you said about behaviors are a way to communicate. I have a daughter that's on the spectrum and she's nonverbal, so that I understand. Like when she's pissed or she's sad, we're trying to figure it out. So that's so true, is her behaviors. So, yeah. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a thing that I'm trying to live into as much as possible, that even affirming to kids when I see certain behaviors before I go into accusation mode, I can say, so it seems like what you're communicating to me is that whatever's happening right now isn't working for you. Do I have you right? And so really just like talking to kids and talking them through their hard moments. We had, for those of you, like, you know how it is, like we're in registration land right now. And so this is the time of the year where we're not back for another few days, but this is the time of the year where parents are bringing kids into the building to get them signed up and registered. And so there's usually always someone on hand that just says hi to the kids, someone there to welcome kids. And on my day, that it was time to welcome kids. A mom and a son came in. Mom is in the office doing paperwork. And one of my jobs is to browse kids through books and to kind of talk to them about all of the fun that we're gonna have. And there was a young person who was just not having it. He didn't say it, but I could tell from his body language, I could tell from how he moved. And so I just said to him, you know, like, it seems like you're not really excited about starting school, and I get it. And so is there anything that we can build together right now that might make 2 weeks from now better for you? You know, and it was really interesting to watch this middle schooler who's used to behaving in a certain way and then being dismissed, right? The kids kind of sometimes are like, well, if I behave in this way, then this is how adults usually respond. But to actually lean in and to ask questions was a really powerful thing for both of us to experience. And so thank you so much for being here.
I think something that was also powerful for me was I spend a lot of time thinking about the kids in my classroom, and this is playing out like what I'm hearing about like how the pleasure survival. I totally ignored my own children, their feelings and what's going on. Like I'm playing back like what happened last year in school with them, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think it is really important to like make sure that I'm also taking care of my family and not just the one at school. And that's super powerful to me. So thank you.
Thank you. And that has been huge. Like, and as a matter of fact, open invitation. I mean, I'm grappling with this as a parent all the time. That again, none of us have done this before. And I invest so much into the kids around the world, and yeah, just being able to watch my own kids. And so if you all ever want to hop on a Zoom and just kind of talk through the weirdness of being a parent right now, I mean, that is like, my wife and I are really thinking just like actively about that. And again, there's no handbook for it. Like, you know, usually if I'm having difficulty, I go to the library and check something out, but there's no handbook for parenting in a pandemic right now. And so thank you just for acknowledging what we're all feeling. I so needed to hear that.
Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Reggie. I'm the nutrition supervisor at Bird Elementary.
Reggie. Oh, Reggie, I'm so excited that you're here.
Cornelius, what I wanted to ask you was, we here at Sun Prairie, we work very hard for our students. And a lot of us have students that are thriving to grow and everything else. But at the same time, we as a body that's trying to teach our students to be the best they can, they still always have to go home. And if the parents are not on the same boat that we're in, it's like we could teach them as much as we can, and they could say, okay, this is what they got to do. But when they get back home with the parents, and the parents on the phone, and the parents not checking the homework, the parents not in the book bag, they don't know what's going on. So I think that we should have one of these for the parents so they can understand.
Yes. You know,
I think if we can get the parents on the same, in the boat with us, we would have the community would be so much better. And I have 5 kids in the district, and my kids are avid. And when my daughter, she thinks she gonna slip up in avid, he on the phone with me. And so she can't get out of it. And I think if we get the parents on the same team with us, we can go to the moon with this.
Yeah,
Thank
Reggie. Oh man, Reggie. Like, if we can get Reggie to run for president, first of all, that's huge. But Reggie, I have been thinking about that just in such big ways, and things for me really got difficult a year ago when we were last year when we were coming back into the school building, and I had called a few parents just because when the pandemic hit in March, everything went dark, right? Like we weren't really connected to parents, we were just trying to survive. And so last year when we were starting the school year, I made it a point to reach out to some parents just to figure out what was going on, just to get a sense of where their heads were at. And there were 2 things that I learned from that communication. One of the fathers, a gentleman named Mr. David. Mr. David spoke to me, and it really, I don't know, I've just never been here before. But Mr. David said, Mr. David works at a big corporation here in New York City, and he said to me, he's like, Mr. Miner, I'm doing everything I can to survive. And what's interesting is Mr. Davis, his family's middle class. They have food to eat. They had clothes to wear. They don't want for anything. But he's like, my time right now, I am struggling to survive just to keep food on the table. He's like, we're not starving by any means. We're lucky enough to be able to feed and clothe ourselves. But that takes an incredible effort on my part. And I was asking him, I was like, Mr. Davis, well, how can I best support you? Because if you feel in this way and you're a parent who wants to be involved, then a lot of parents must be feeling this way. And so one of the things that Mr. Davis said to me that I'm holding on to is he says, sometimes when you communicate to us, you don't know we listening, but we hear you. And so he was like, those little messages you send, those little phone calls that you make, sometimes I won't pick up because I can't. Sometimes I won't pick up because I don't want to. But like I hear you. And so one of the things that I have been attempting to do to support parents like Mr. Davis who want to be there but just can't be, who think about us, but whose world is so full of lots of other things, I stay communicating. So one of the things that I have done is I have been sending 3-sentence notes to parents. When they see the big email, that's weird. And so I have promised the parents, I started this in December after talking to Mr. David, but I said, you know what, every email you get from me is not going to be longer than 3 sentences. So when you get an email from me, like, please read it. Like, I'm going to labor, and so sometimes it's not even a full sentence. Sometimes it's a couple of words like book bag, homework, check it, right? So sometimes it's just a couple of words, but I've with so much to do, sometimes parents get intimidated by our communication. So that was one promise that I made to parents, is that I'm going to send you 3-sentence emails. I started using an app to send videos to parents as well. So I used the Loom app. If you don't feel like reading my email, I will also send 20-second videos every other week. And so those are 2 forms of communication, a 3-sentence email each week and a 20-second video, where for 20 seconds, I'm gonna just tell you what you need to know for the next 2 weeks about what we're doing in this class. And that I found helpful. But, Mr. Reggie, one of the things that also I'm just like really learning to embrace, just to relieve my stress, because I tend to go home and worry about the same things that you go home and worry about. To alleviate my stress, I am acknowledging that the thing that I can influence is the thing that happens from 8:20 to 3. That, that I can't influence what happens after 3, but the thing that I can influence is from 8:20 to 3. And so I talk to children about code switching. And I talk to young kids about this. I say that, sometimes, and the way I open up the conversation is like, all kids know, like, when you go to a basketball game, you know how to behave at a basketball game. In a basketball game, you got to yell and jump up and down. And then I tell kids, when you go to the supermarket, it's different than a basketball game. You can't yell and jump up and down at a supermarket. That we learn different ways to be depending on where we are. And so I talk to kids that there's a way that we be at school and there's a way that we be at home. So I don't know what happens in your home, but there are ways to be at home and there are rules that apply to home and there are ways to be here. And so I always want to point out for kids. When I talk about how we be together in school, I always say that, this is a school thing. And so I know at home when we have snacks, or at home when you have an argument, there are other ways to do it. But the way that we have arguments in school is this way. The way that we do snacks at school is this way, and that has been really, really powerful for kids, teaching them that code switching earlier to say that, yep, it's like the basketball game supermarket dynamic. When you go to the grocery store, you can't jump up and down because somebody's going to look at you crazy. When you go to the basketball game, you're expected to jump up and down. And so we early in life learn the rules to code switch in our community. We can learn those rules to code switch between home and school. And kids have found a lot of support there. Yeah, but thank you for being here. I hope you run for president, sir. I just really appreciate your insights. So thank you. Thank you.
Cornelius,
Yeah.
I have to tell you before this next comment, someone tried to talk Reggie into going to a different school in our system. You should have seen his principal, Nicole, hunting people down. I thought it was going to be a grudge match right in the Sun Prairie School District.
See, I know talent when I see it. So Reggie, we need you to be a senator real quick so you can run for the White House, because we need you in this country, sir. So thank you.
It's all good. Shandu's got one on the other side.
All
Hey, Cornelius. Hi, it's Dawn Payne. How are you?
Hey, Dawn.
Good to see you. I have a couple questions. First of all, thank you so much for validating probably what all of us are feeling right now, is that the child comes first. But I'm wondering about how the media and the parents are saying my child has lost so much. It was a lost year. And so how do we become that frontline help between what we know professionally and to help the parents come on board with us?
Absolutely. One of the things that is so important in the work that we do, well, I'm going to use this is how I learned it. So Dawn, I'm going to answer it like my mentor helped me to understand it. My mentor introduced the idea of discourse. And discourse is all of the things that we say to each other in society. It's the social media, the Facebook and the Twitter. Discourse is what we see on television. Discourse is how we talk to each other in the parking lot of the school. So all of these conversations that are happening around us. And here's what we know about discourse. For people who analyze what we call social discourse, the things that get repeated most often on the biggest platforms often get accepted as true, even when they are not. And I'll say that again. The things that get repeated most often on the biggest platforms often get accepted as true, even when they are not. And so what happens in human society when faced with the reality of our own lives and the messages that are repeated over and over again, people will often accept the messages that are repeated over and over again, even though the reality of their own lives tell them something different. And so when we are working to enter the discourse in ways that, and you've probably heard this language before, in ways that are asset-based and not in ways that are deficit-oriented. So all of the learning loss has been deficit orientation, right? And so there are three things that then I have sought to do as an educator to really combat that negative discourse. The first thing that I want to do is I have labored, and I've been doing this since January, but I have been articulating each week for kids and for parents. And I want to do this in kid-friendly ways. I want kids to understand how much they have grown this week. So for example, one of the things at the height of the pandemic, when there wasn't much language arts instruction happening, one of the things that I wanted kids to understand is that you're still growing. Like, you were the kind of kid last week who had trouble naming what you needed for an adult. At the end of this week, you are the kind of kid who can articulate the things that they need for an adult. That is communicative growth. And I'm being able to name that for a kid so that they understand how they've grown. Or you were the kind of kid last week who were easily distracted by the enormity of this moment. This week, you've become the kind of learner who can focus. So being able to articulate for kids and their parents how much they've grown, because people see growth as A, B, C, D, right? They don't recognize all of these all of these powerful communicative skills that kids have learned this year. And so every week when I send kids home, I want each kid specifically to know how they've grown. And what's interesting is all of these things connect to standards, right? That when we talk about reading standards, math standards, writing standards, history standards, science standards, all of these things are about being able to recognize and sort and categorize information, being able to communicate effectively, being able to name a point and support that point. And so I might say that, wow, you're the kind of learner who used to have a hard time naming your needs in front of adults. Now you're the kind of learner who is used to or getting better at naming your needs in front of adults. So that's a human behavior, but that's also standard one. How do I form a claim, right? You know, and so being able to help kids to see that, yeah, we're learning in non-traditional ways, but we're still learning. And so constant communication is my first approach. My second approach is like helping kids to recognize that schoolwork looks different. That there are some kids who don't believe they're doing schoolwork if they're not filling out a worksheet. And so, for example, saying to kids that schoolwork can be having a discussion with a friend where you're citing text evidence. And so even though you're not writing on paper, that's still schoolwork because you're leaning into standards-based behavior, right? So helping kids and parents to see that sometimes when we have a discussion about a book, that's schoolwork. That sometimes when we ask questions about science, that's schoolwork. And it doesn't always look like writing in a notebook. And so helping people to see that a lot of parents especially are used to schoolwork looking a certain way because we went to school in the 70s and 80s, right? But now, like, schoolwork looks different because we know a lot more about the learning process. And then the third thing that I have been communicating is this conversation around learning loss. I've been helping to name for people that this conversation around learning loss is really driven by the testing industrial complex. I'll just be quite honest that benchmarks, right? We have this idea of what a third grade benchmark is. We have this idea of what a fifth grade benchmark is, right? And so people are like, oh, if a kid by the time they're 8 is not meeting the third grade benchmark, that means that they've lost learning. Now, one of the things that I've helped parents in my community to understand is that benchmarks are invented by people who don't got nothing to do with kids. And I'll actually play a really interesting game with you right here. That again, benchmarks are invented by people who ain't got nothing to do with kids. Here's an interesting thing. So if you've got a device on you right now, here's a little story. I graduated from high school in 1996. So you can Google New York State standards in 1996, and you can see all of the standards that I had to meet in order to graduate in 1996. So you can Google that. Like, and actually what's really interesting is if you look at the state standards in 1996, and I was a great student. I took all the AP classes, I did all the extracurriculars, I was top of my class, all those things. So once you find the standards from 1996, you can also look up the standards from 2020. And when you put those standards next to each other, this is what you're gonna see. That in 1996, I was given a high school diploma for meeting the standards for a 12th grader in 1996. The standards for 12th grade in 1996 are equivalent to the 7th grade standards for 2020. Now, here's the thing. Did humanity change? No. Did we get smarter? Did we evolve? No. The only thing that changed between 1996 and 2020 is Congress. That standards were created again by people in offices outside of our school, right? And so there were a group of people who got together in 1996 and decided this is what you need to graduate from 12th grade. And those same people got reconvened in 2020 and they said, well, this is what you need now to graduate from 12th grade. And so 12th grade in 96 is equivalent to 7th grade now. Here's why I tell that story. The standards are constructed again by people, right? Now here's the thing. So even though standards are constructed, they still have very real consequences, right? Because people judge us and they judge our schools based on standards and how kids do on these assessments. And so I talk to parents and to colleagues about it. One of the conversations that I have every year is that we are going to seek to grow kids profoundly. That is our mission here. That every kid we meet, we're going to assess where they are, right? And it is our mission at school to ensure that kids grow a year or more every year. And here's what we know from statistics. We know that some of the best teachers in America are growing kids between 1.2 and 1.7 years in 1 year's time, right? So it's possible, let's say a year and a half. It's possible for kids to grow up to a year and a half in the space of 1 year. And so I like to be realistic with parents. And I'm proud of my abilities. that I tell parents all the time that if you work alongside me and the rest of the coaches and the teachers here, your kid's going to grow profoundly this year. That we think your kid can grow more than a year. But then here's what this means, and here's how this plays out in real life. If your kid is a fifth grader, and they're, for the most part, at fifth grade level, and we grow your kid more than a year this year, that means your kid is going to be knocking on the door of seventh grade when they leave here. And that's powerful. If your kid is a fifth grader, and they're about a year behind, right? So if your kid is a fifth grader and they're reading or doing math at the fourth grade level, we're excited about meeting your kid where they are at the fourth grade level because we are confident in our ability to grow them a year to a year and a half. But that also means that if you've got a fifth grader and your fifth grader is at the second grade level, realistically, we can't gain that much ground in a year. But what I can promise you, because, and this is my heartfelt belief, and this is why I love talking to you all there in Sun Prairie, because you all know what we know here in New York City, that what America needs isn't necessarily good teachers. What America needs is good schools. And here's what I mean by this, that if you're at the second grade level or the third grade level in the fifth grade, and we work really hard, so let's say you're at the third grade level in the fifth grade, we work really hard, and we grow you a year and a half, what that means is you're going to be at the fourth grade level or maybe 4.5 by the end of your fifth grade year. So that means that you're going to sit for a state exam. And there are going to be people from the state who say that you have failed and that your teacher has failed. But when we look at your growth, here's what we know in Brooklyn and here's what we know in Sun Prairie, that any kid who was behind and grew a year and a half, no matter what the test says, that is not failure. And so when we talk about learning loss, when we talk about like what we value for kids, like that's what's important to me. Can I articulate a path of growth and can I show evidence how a kid has grown 1 year, a year and a half? Those of you who have followed my work for a long time know that in 2008, I was very fortunate. I won the President's Service Award in Education. So I got to go visit DC and talk to all of the people in DC. And that was an incredible, well, it was a mixed honor for me. For those of you who know the history of New York, I'm a special ed teacher. I think folks know that about me. And New York City, in around about that time, had started printing our test scores in the newspaper. And so to shame teachers, what they would do is they would say, this teacher in this neighborhood has these test scores, or this teacher in this neighborhood has these test scores. So I was really proud that year because I win, and this was in March. In March 2008, I win the President's Service Award in Education. March 2008, I'm so excited. I'm scheduled to go visit Washington, D.C. in July. I'm so excited. In June 2008, my test scores are printed in the newspaper. That at the time I was working in a class, a small class of 12 children, and what was printed in the newspaper, you can still Google it. You look up Mr. Miner's name and it's there. And what they printed in the paper was that Mr. Miner of Brooklyn, New York, District 15, had 0% of his students meeting state level proficiency in reading. And that was such a blow to me, right? That what the paper leaves out is that all of my kids were multilingual and speaking English for the first time. What the paper leaves out is that all of my kids have learning disabilities. What the paper left out is that all of my kids grew at least 2 years under my care. Sure, they didn't meet state level benchmark for the grade, but what it left out was that incredible story of growth. What it left out was how hard they worked to be where they were. And so I was heartbroken because here I am about to go to DC and I'm in the newspaper as being the worst teacher in New York City. And I remember going to my union rep at the time and just saying to him, I was like, I can't go. I can't represent our city like this, being in the newspaper. And my union rep said to me in that moment, he was like, Cornelius, you are the perfect person to go and represent us now. That you get to go and tell the story of teachers and kids and families who work so hard to meet the needs of kids, and teachers and families and students who aren't seen because we only believe the mechanism of the test, because people don't see the growth that we do every day. People don't see how hard kids work to read and to speak and to write. You know, all of those things matter. And so as we start this year, I hope that we can develop ways to tell our story that represent the authentic work that kids invest. You know, that if the only way that we have to tell our story is a score, then we're telling the wrong story, right? That you all worked so hard and so artfully to ensure that your students create and think and compose. And not all of those things can be measured on the day of an exam. And so as I prepare to kind of close things out for you today, I just want to remind you in an odd way of how great you are, that we are greater than this moment. We are greater than the things that challenge us. And we are certainly greater than the things that people say about us. That it is a difficult time to be an educator, and that you all have found ways to love kids despite the difficulty. That you all have found ways to love and support each other despite the difficulty says everything about the kind of future that you all are creating for children and families there in Sun Prairie, and for the kind of future that we are creating for children all over this world. I am so honored to call myself your colleague, and I am so thrilled to have worked beside you for this short period of time today. I certainly hope that it was useful, and I wish you all the best this school year. I want to end just like I started. Like, I think it is important to tell teachers as often as possible how loved they are. So as I close out this meeting today, I hope that there are people somewhere in this community lined up to remind you how much they love you. That I love you, I love you, I love you. You all have done incredible work, and we have a beautiful future full of possibilities ahead of us. Happy New Year.
Oh, yay! You know, this is like back in the day at a concert when you'd like get out your lighter, don't get out lighters if you have them, and be like, come back, we need an encore. So how about another round of applause for Cornelius?
Oh, thank you.
I know
Thank you.
speak.
And I hope that you all know, you all are 2 weeks ahead of me. So I might be calling you all in about 2 weeks with a voice full of tears, trying to figure out how you all have done it.
There is always a
so
job for you
appreciate
in
it.
Sun Prairie, Cornelius. Come on over. We'll hire you in a minute. Reggie probably needs a partner at Bird, so come on over. We got you, Cornelius. We got you. So I know I speak on behalf of our team that a collective, when you went off the screen, went up in the room. So you're the gift we needed today. Thank you. We appreciate you, and we hope you have a good start to the year too, Cornelius. And team, thank you much. Have a beautiful afternoon. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.